Sylvia thought no one knew about her secret crush on Nigel, until Nigel, to please his unattainable love Vanessa, placed Sylvia's feelings as a bet on the gaming table. Sylvia then realized her affection was nothing more than a crude joke to Nigel. Hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. Sylvia, you're late. Your competition eligibility has been revoked, at 5:30 in the afternoon. Outside the Shanghai Symphony Hall, Sylvia stared at the staff's cold expression, feeling a chill run through her entire body. Today was supposed to be the day of the violin advancement competition. Nigel and Patrick had deliberately given her the wrong time, causing her to miss the competition and the chance to interview at the Yale School of Music. In her daze, the venue doors swung open, and a dozen young boys and girls walked out. Sylvia's eyes welled up as she looked at the three most dazzling people in the crowd: the cellist, Nigel, the violinist, Vanessa, and the violist, Patrick. They were Sylvia's quartet teammates, and even more, good friends who had grown up together. They had even agreed to join the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra together after graduating from university and play in a quartet for the rest of their lives. That was indeed the case before, but a month ago, Sylvia's mother suddenly married Vanessa's father, both coming from divorced families. From that day on, everything changed. Sylvia was not only deliberately or unintentionally isolated by the three of them, but to ensure Vanessa could win the medal in this qualifying competition, Nigel and Patrick even conspired to deceive her. Vanessa never wanted to go to Yale School of Music in the first place, yet they still went ahead with it. Sylvia felt as if a heavy stone had plummeted in her heart. At this moment, the friendship between the four of them finally came to an end, and so should her 3-year secret crush on Nigel. As the three approached, Sylvia finally met their gaze. Nigel wore his usual expressionless face. Beside him, Vanessa smugly waved the bronze medal in her hand, while Patrick didn't even change his smile. Sylvia stared at them for a few seconds like this. In the end, she didn't step forward but turned away without a word. Sylvia didn't go home. Instead, she went to the music room to practice. The national quartet competition in 3 months would be her last chance to compete for a spot at the Yale School of Music. Additionally, she had sent her audition videos to all the foreign music conservatories she knew of. No matter what, she was going abroad. She wanted to escape her current life and the people in it. The next day, Sylvia had just come downstairs from the second floor when she saw Nigel and the other two sitting on the first floor, laughing and playing around, thoroughly enjoying themselves. Ever since Sylvia moved into the family with Sylvia's mom, she had witnessed this scene countless times. Sylvia walked up to them silently and said calmly, "When are we going to practice?" Nigel flashed a look of annoyance at being interrupted, showing not a trace of guilt for having deceived her the day before. "No practice today. Vanessa won a medal yesterday and said she's throwing a party to celebrate." Nigel suddenly remembered he hadn't invited her, paused for a moment, then asked, "Would you like to come?" Sylvia glanced at Vanessa, whose expression had already darkened, then shook her head proactively. "No thanks, I'll go practice piano then." With that, he left alone once more, carrying his instrument case on his back. After a few steps, the soft, complaining voice of Vanessa rang out behind him. "Nigel, why did you invite her? Don't you know I can't stand her right now? She's just like her mother, scheming and dishonest." Patrick's careless voice followed. "Yeah, maybe Sylvia only befriended Vanessa in the first place because she wanted to climb the social ladder. Otherwise, why wouldn't she make friends with anyone else but us?" Sylvia paused mid-step. The words pierced her heart like sharp thorns. She couldn't even tell whether the memory of the four of them making dreams together was reality or just a dream. Sylvia blinked her eyes, gripped the instrument case tighter, and walked out the door. In the school music room, Sylvia practiced from 10 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, estimating that Vanessa's party must have ended, before putting away her violin and preparing to go home. As soon as she entered the door, she saw 3 exquisitely dressed people, each dragging a suitcase, ready to leave. Sylvia's heart skipped a beat. Ignoring Vanessa's eye roll, she blocked their way. "Where are you going?" No sooner had she spoken than Vanessa haughtily lifted her chin. "Does it concern you where we go?" Sylvia's breath hitched. It was as if a large wad of cotton had been stuffed into her throat. It took a long time before she managed to squeeze out the words, "But the quartet competition is coming up soon, Sylvia." Nigel cut her off mercilessly. His words were spoken lightly, yet they pierced Sylvia's heart like the sharpest dagger. "I forgot to tell you, we've decided not to participate in the quartet competition 3 months from now." Sylvia turned pale bit by bit. "Why?" Vanessa frowned and retorted bluntly, "Not participating means not participating. Do I need a reason for that?" Sylvia clutched her violin case tightly, feeling both absurd and ridiculous. Her gaze suddenly turned cold. "So you've decided not to participate in the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra's audition?" And don't care whether you'll join as a principal or just an ordinary member after graduation. Is that it? In that case, I'll go find new teammates. Sylvia turned to leave without hesitation, but was stopped by Patrick. Sylvia, why so angry? Patrick stepped forward and draped an arm over her shoulder, looking at her with a half smile. Just joking around. When can't we go traveling? It's the same after the competition ends. By then we'll have graduated from high school too. Won't that make the trip even more fun? Patrick brushed the matter aside effortlessly. They were always ambitious about their futures. There was no way they'd actually indulge Vanessa in such whims. Sylvia secretly breathed a sigh of relief, then saw Vanessa fling her suitcase aside and storm upstairs again, and Nigel followed her without a moment's hesitation. Seeing this, Sylvia's eyes darkened. Even though she had already decided to give up on her secret crush, Sylvia, I'll need your help with the music again this time. Patrick beside her suddenly spoke, his smile full of certainty. After all, we're best friends, aren't we? Sylvia's heart sank. Yes, she and Patrick were best friends that year. At 7 years old, Sylvia had just moved to Muyuan with her mother when she accidentally saw Patrick fall into the public swimming pool. She screamed herself hoarse to call adults, saving Patrick's life. From that day on, Patrick followed her around all day, sweetly calling her sister. From a little milkball who wasn't even as tall as her, he grew into her best friend whom she had to look up to see his jawline, and then this best friend unceremoniously set her up for Vanessa. Sylvia's nose suddenly stung, and she pulled away from his hand, muttering, I'm heading back to my room first. I'll send the music piece to the group chat later, late at night. Sylvia sent the piece she had chosen to the group chat shared by the four of them. Take a listen and decide which piece to use for the competition. Before she sent the message, the chat had been buzzing with lively conversation, but the moment she spoke up, all messages came to an abrupt halt. Sylvia waited for a long time before they finally sent messages one after another. Nigel, second song, Vanessa, but I think the first one was better. Patrick, I'll choose the first one. Nigel. Then I'll choose the first one too. Nigel finished, and the three seamlessly picked up their previous conversation, completely excluding Sylvia. Sylvia was silent for a moment before replying with an okay. That night, she pulled another all-nighter, working on the song's arrangement. Half a month later, the day the song was finished, Sylvia sent the demo to the group chat. The group finally arrived at the school music room together and began their practice. The four started playing simultaneously. Their decade-long collaboration now perfected to mastery. This was why Vanessa, despite her intense loathing for Sylvia, still had to partner with Sylvia. Besides Sylvia, she could never find another violinist so exceptionally skilled yet willingly content to play second fiddle for her. Half an hour later, Sylvia put away her bow, only to hear applause erupting outside the practice room. Looking over, she was surprised to see it was the school's string music instructor, Professor Jacques, who also happened to be the principal conductor of the Shanghai Philharmonic Orchestra. Professor Jacques gazed at them with admiration and said sincerely, truly the finest quartet our school has produced this year. Your performance was absolutely flawless. Sylvia couldn't help but smile. Then Nigel immediately stood up and stepped forward humbly to respond. You flatter us, Professor. We still have much to learn. Professor Jacques looked even more pleased upon hearing this. The credit mainly goes to your excellent composition of this piece. As he spoke, a sudden glimmer of interest flashed across his face as his gaze swept over the four of them. Which of you arranged this piece? Sylvia brightened, about to admit it. When Patrick's hand landed on her shoulder, she paused for a moment. In that pause, she heard Nigel say without hesitation, Vanessa did it. She really is a genius, isn't she? Sylvia froze instantly, and when she met Patrick's smiling eyes, she understood everything. They had worked in tandem, forcing her to hand over this work to Vanessa. Even if she spoke up to refute them now, with 3 against 1, the professor would never believe her version. Instead, they'd think she was trying to steal credit. Sylvia clenched her hands, her face gradually turning pale, watching helplessly as the professor handed his business card to Vanessa with an appreciative smile, adding, if you're ever interested in joining the Shanghai Philharmonic in the future, feel free to contact me in advance. Vanessa was overjoyed. Really, thank you, Professor Tilda, I'm so happy. Congratulations, Vanessa, you're so talented, you deserve all of this. Nigel and Patrick were quick to offer their congratulations, standing on either side of her like knights protecting a princess in a Western novel. And what about her? What was she then? Sylvia really wanted to just get up and leave. But she couldn't, for the sake of the quartet competition 2 months later. No matter how hard it was to swallow this grievance, she had to force it down. A few days later came Sylvia's 18th birthday, yet she didn't want to celebrate it, simply because her birthday actually fell on the same day as Vanessa's. Before the incident, she had always celebrated her birthday with Vanessa. Back then, Patrick used to joke that they were sisters born of different parents. Now that they've become real sisters, Vanessa treats her like an enemy instead. Sylvia left early in the morning with her instrument case on her back. She didn't return home until very late, only to find Vanessa's birthday party still ongoing. Vanessa, dressed in an exquisite white dress, was surrounded by Nigel Patrick. Her initially joyful face darkened the moment she saw Sylvia. What rotten luck! Sylvia felt bitterness spread across her tongue. But seeing Sylvia's mom watching her expectantly from the dining table, she had no choice but to drag her feet forward. Sylvia's mom immediately broke into a satisfied smile, presenting the cake and placing it proudly before Vanessa. Vanessa, Auntie made this cake specially for you. Do you like it? Vanessa let out a cold laugh and openly mocked. So it seems you used these petty tricks to seduce my dad, Vanessa. Vanessa's dad warned disapprovingly before softening his tone to console. Your brothers Nigel and Patrick came personally to celebrate your birthday. Can't you at least try to be happy? Nigel understood immediately and presented his gift, a 10-carat diamond necklace. He said gently and affectionately, Vanessa, it's your birthday today, don't get upset over unimportant people. Okay. Patrick followed closely with his gift, his refined profile full of tenderness, and me too. This is the bag I went through so much trouble to get. You can't just wear it once and never again. Okay. Amidst everyone's flattery, Vanessa finally beamed with joy. Sylvia watched as Sylvia's mom's eyes gradually shifted from anticipation to disappointment. Just as she stepped forward, she saw the cake read, Happy birthday, Vanessa. Only Vanessa's name. Even her mother had forgotten that today was also her birthday. Sylvia felt her eyes grow hot and turned directly to go upstairs, behind her. Their laughter continued to reach her ears as she told herself, Sylvia, happy birthday, you must be happy. That night, Sylvia was about to go to bed when suddenly there was a knock at the door. Sylvia's mom came in holding a box, sat by the bed, and placed it in front of Sylvia. Sylvia froze. Her heart was filled with both joy and complexity. She thought Sylvia's mom had remembered her birthday and come to give her a gift. But then Sylvia's mom spoke up, Sylvia, how could you be so inconsiderate today? Vanessa is your sister, and you didn't even prepare a gift for her birthday. Take this, give it to Vanessa tomorrow, and apologize to her again. Sylvia froze instantly. Sylvia's mom softened her tone when she saw Sylvia remained silent. I know you've been wronged, but it wasn't easy for me to get together with your Uncle Parker. Just do it for my sake and give Vanessa more leeway. Sylvia's heart grew colder and colder, unable to utter a single word. Sylvia's mom knew she was wronged, but didn't care at all, even forcing her to compromise. Her heart had long since been biased. After Sylvia's mom left, Sylvia opened the box to find a dazzling diamond bracelet inside. She couldn't help but touch the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one her late father had given her, and could no longer hold back the overwhelming sorrow. Burying herself under the covers as tears spilled out, Dad, if only you were still here. The next day, in the piano room, Sylvia hesitated for a long time before finally carrying the box over to Vanessa. Happy birthday to you. As for an apology, she simply couldn't bring herself to say it. Vanessa raised an eyebrow and picked up the box to unwrap it. Sylvia finally relaxed when she saw this. As I turned to return to my seat, I suddenly heard Vanessa speak arrogantly. Wait, Sylvia paused. Turning back, she saw Vanessa's gaze fixed tightly on the silver bracelet on her wrist, instinctively wanting to pull her sleeve down, yet Vanessa still extended her hand toward her with a condescending air. Of course, you should give gifts that the other person likes. I prefer that bracelet on your hand. Give it to me. Sylvia held her breath. Vanessa had everything, her family's favor, diamond necklaces, designer bags. How could she possibly want this silver bracelet? It was just her habitual desire to take what was hers. She didn't want to give it. Sylvia said bluntly, Vanessa, if you like it, I can buy you an identical one. No, I'll get you an even prettier one. Vanessa immediately raised her eyebrows with keen interest. If it was just a whim before, now she genuinely wanted it. Vanessa immediately looked pitifully at Nigel and said, Nigel, Sylvia took my dad away from me, and all I want is a bracelet. Why won't she even let me have that? Sylvia felt her heart suddenly clench as she tightened her grip on her bracelet, emphasizing each word. I told you, I can exchange it for something else. Yet no one at the scene paid her any attention. Nigel walked without hesitation to Sylvia, his ice-cold eyes fixed on her. Word for word, he said, will you hand it over willingly, or shall I take it myself? Sylvia froze. Nigel, however, had lost his patience. He unceremoniously grabbed her hand, intending to take off the bracelet. Sylvia immediately began to struggle in terror. Let me go. Yet no matter how she struggled, she couldn't break free. She looked pleadingly at Patrick. Patrick stood up and approached leisurely. Sylvia thought he was coming to help her after all. Patrick knew this bracelet was the last keepsake left to her by her late father. The next second, she found her other hand seized by Patrick. Sylvia instantly turned deathly pale, looking at Patrick in disbelief. Nigel took advantage of the opportunity to effortlessly snatch the bracelet and present it to Vanessa. Patrick finally released Sylvia with a smile, speaking down to her from his superior position. "Who are you putting on this act for, Sylvia? This is what you owe her. If Vanessa wants it, you have to give it." Sylvia's eyes gradually reddened, a scalding teardrop fell on Patrick's hand, startling him for a second. Sylvia no longer looked at him, instead reaching her hand toward Vanessa. "Give it back." Vanessa gave a disdainful laugh, smugly putting on the bracelet while eyeing its tiny scratches with contempt flashing in her eyes. "It's just some shabby bracelet, don't act like I'm bullying you. Here, take it back." Vanessa pretended to hand it over but suddenly changed direction, flinging the bracelet straight out the window. "No!" Sylvia's pupils constricted sharply, and she ran to the window to look. The bracelet was caught on the outdoor air conditioning unit. Precariously dangling, Sylvia didn't hesitate for a moment, flipping over to retrieve it. The instant she got the bracelet, her foot slipped, and she fell from the windowsill. In that instant, Patrick immediately changed his expression and shouted, "Sylvia!" Meanwhile, Nigel ran downstairs without a word, his face ashen. Neither of them paid any further attention to Vanessa. Vanessa stood there, her expression growing increasingly grim. Nigel carried Sylvia on the first floor when she had already fainted. Patrick arrived shortly after, and the two of them took Sylvia to the hospital. 2 hours later, Sylvia slowly regained consciousness. Seeing the bracelet still tightly clutched in her hand, she finally let out a sigh of relief. The nurse beside her said sternly when she woke up, "Young lady, don't do such dangerous things again. Luckily, you only fell from the second floor, just a sprained ankle and some scrapes. If it had been 1 floor higher, you'd definitely have broken bones. Don't do this again next time." "You didn't see how frantic your two friends were when they brought you to the hospital." Sylvia froze, her heart filled with mixed emotions. So they weren't completely indifferent to her safety after all. Just as I was thinking, the hospital room door suddenly swung open. Nigel and Patrick walked in one after another. Sylvia was about to thank them when Nigel opened his mouth with, "If you're going to jump off a building next time, better find somewhere with no people." And Patrick quickly followed up with, "Are you out of your mind? It's just a damn bracelet. It's fine if you die, but don't drag Vanessa into it, okay?" They weren't concerned about her physical condition. They were just worried that if something happened to her, it would implicate Vanessa. Sylvia's heart was sharply pierced, and all sounds were caught in her throat. The two of them spoke and then left. The empty ward quickly fell into complete silence, but before long, the silence was broken by Sylvia's mom, who arrived in a hurry. Sylvia's mom pushed open the ward door, first asking the nurse if Sylvia's violin-playing hand was injured. Upon learning her hand was fine, she immediately sighed in relief. Then she turned around and began scolding Sylvia without hesitation. "If that broken necklace is lost, then it's lost. Just buy another one. Why are you arguing with Vanessa again, Sylvia? Are you deliberately trying to embarrass me?" Sylvia stared blankly at the woman in front of her, and suddenly her vision blurred. The next day, Sylvia was discharged from the hospital. Her right foot was sprained, and she hobbled to the practice room with her cello, her foot wrapped in gauze. As she entered the room, Nigel let his gaze linger on her feet for a moment before looking away and saying, "Since you're here, we'll still play the string quartet. The teacher will come to judge later, don't hold us back." Sylvia nodded silently. Half an hour later, the teacher arrived with the musical scores and said before starting, "For this quartet competition, your team is the school's most likely candidate to win the championship, so you must practice diligently and absolutely cannot make any mistakes. Do you hear me?" All four responded in unison. The teacher nodded in satisfaction, then opened the score. "Begin." Sylvia calmly closed her eyes, her mind now free of distractions. For the first time, she didn't hold back her full potential. Even while handling the foundational parts of the quartet, she instantly captured everyone's attention. Nigel and Patrick were both astonished, their strings instinctively following her rhythm. Vanessa lacked mental resilience, and her already unpolished performance became even more error-prone under pressure, causing the teacher to frown repeatedly. When the piece ended, the teacher said bluntly, "You've got the positions wrong. The violin section needs to switch places. Sylvia will take the lead, Vanessa will play the supporting part." Sylvia replied calmly, "Thank you, teacher." Only Vanessa looked upset. After the class ended, Sylvia slung her instrument bag over her shoulder and tried to walk past them. But Vanessa stopped her with a cold expression. "Sylvia, how could you be so shameless? Do you really enjoy taking things that don't belong to you?" Sylvia's heart clenched violently. She retorted without hesitation, "I didn't know playing the violin better than you could be considered a fault." Vanessa instantly lost her composure. You, Nigel immediately frowned and stepped forward, shielding Vanessa as he looked down at Sylvia with authority. Go tell the teacher you're voluntarily giving up the first violinist position to Vanessa. Patrick, who always smiled, lost his smile at this moment, looking at Sylvia with displeasure. I told you, you must always be Vanessa's sidekick. You owe her this. Sylvia gritted her teeth. Looking at the three people in front of her, she finally couldn't help but tear up, feeling a wave of grievance wash over her. Why should she always give in to Vanessa in everything? Just because her mom married her dad, it wasn't her who made her mom marry, nor was it her who made Vanessa's dad marry her mom. In this matter, she's never done anything wrong to Vanessa. Sylvia took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the three people in front of her, and refused word by word, I don't want to. As soon as her words fell, the three people in front of her were startled. Patrick's face instantly turned cold, and he said angrily, I think you're not thinking straight. I'll make you sober up right now. With that, he directly snatched Sylvia's phone and pushed her to the ground. Sylvia winced in pain, but when she looked up again, she saw the three of them quickly walk out the door. Nigel closed the door expressionlessly, his thin lips parting slightly as he spoke. Sylvia, it's good to know your place. What doesn't belong to you will never belong to you. Sylvia was startled and immediately rushed forward, pounding on the door. Nigel, Patrick. You can't do this to me. The music room was in a secluded location and had excellent soundproofing. If she were locked in here, she didn't know how many days it would be before someone found her. Outside the door, Vanessa's feigned voice drifted in, barely audible. Isn't this a bit too much? What if something goes wrong? Sylvia held her breath, then she heard Nigel say nonchalantly, if something goes wrong, just say I did it. Besides, she was the one who got greedy for something that wasn't hers. We're just taking back what rightfully belongs to you. Sylvia slowly sank to the ground, curling herself into a helpless ball. A long time passed before she realized she was crying again. As tears fell onto her knees, she comforted herself, thinking it's okay, they were just trying to scare her, and they would let her out soon. But an hour passed, then a whole night. Sylvia never saw that door open. Just as she was about to faint, Nigel finally opened the door, condescendingly crouched before her, and said, do you know you're wrong? Sylvia closed her eyes, and scalding tears fell. Understood. Her greatest mistake was believing they still cared about the bond they'd shared since childhood. But in truth, apart from her, no one had cared for a long time. She was deceiving herself, clinging to that last shred of illusion. Nigel, having achieved a satisfactory outcome, promptly pulled Sylvia up and wasted no time in escorting her to the teacher's office. Sylvia stood before the teacher, her face pale as she said, Teacher, I don't think I'm capable of handling the lead performer position. Let Vanessa take it instead. The teacher frowned at her, disappointment flashing in his eyes. Understood. Thank you, teacher. Sylvia walked out of the classroom with heavy steps, meeting Nigel's indifferent face. After a long silence, she spoke in a hoarse voice. Are you satisfied now? With that, she turned and left without hesitation. Nigel paused, watching her limping figure retreat into the distance. His brows furrowed instantly, but in the end, he didn't go after her. A few days later, as the rehearsals became increasingly polished, Patrick suggested going to the amusement park to unwind. Sylvia initially didn't want to go, but she couldn't resist Sylvia's mom's repeated insistence. This is a great opportunity to get along with Vanessa, Sylvia. You must go. So in the end, she went. Sylvia's foot hadn't healed at all, and all she could do was watch from below as the three of them laughed and played. Feeling somewhat out of place, she wandered over to the bumper car photo wall and began browsing. As she looked, she suddenly froze. Sylvia actually spotted their group photo from a year ago on the wall. There she and Vanessa stood leaning against each other in the center, forming a heart shape with their hands. Patrick making a silly face beside her, while Nigel stood next to Vanessa with a faint smile. Beneath the photo, there was even the text they had written back then, "We'll be best friends forever." Yet in just a year, how could everything have changed so completely? Sylvia felt a sudden sting in her nose. Just then, Vanessa seemed to recall something and suddenly said, "How long has it been since we last played bumper cars together? Why don't we go for another ride today?" Sylvia instinctively refused, but was forcibly pulled onto the field by Patrick. Then, right at the start of the game, Vanessa steered her bumper car straight into Sylvia with a sudden lunge. With a loud bang, Sylvia's car was thrown against the wall, and the pain in her injured right foot flared up instantly, forcing her to let out a muffled groan. Seeing this, Vanessa grew even more excited, even shouting, "Nigel, Patrick, let's ram her together, all right?" Patrick enthusiastically joined the ramming battle against her. Nigel remained silent but blocked Sylvia's car beside her, cutting off any chance of escape. Sylvia was repeatedly sent flying, bouncing off the walls. She tried to leave, but the two of them always found an opportunity to ram her again. Sylvia, why don't you fight back? Can't you even resist? Vanessa's taunting and mocking voice pierced through her ears. Sylvia clenched her teeth on her lower lip, steeled her heart, and suddenly stomped on the accelerator, ramming straight into Vanessa's bumper car. Vanessa's car was sent flying far away, and she suddenly let out a shriek before bursting into loud sobs. Vanessa, Vanessa! Nigel Patrick simultaneously jumped out of the car and ran over. The staff promptly blew the whistle, cutting power to all the bumper cars. Sylvia was trembling all over, looking down at her ankle which had swollen badly. Vanessa, helped up by Nigel, was crying hysterically and pointed at Sylvia while shouting, "Are you insane? Do you really want me dead that badly?" Nigel frowned even deeper, turned around and roughly dragged Sylvia over, pressing her in front of Vanessa. "Apologize." Sylvia staggered but managed not to fall. Looking up, she saw Vanessa weeping pitifully, and replied with a cold expression, "I did nothing wrong, and I won't apologize." As soon as the words left her mouth, Nigel tightened his grip on her hand, his eyes flashing with icy fury. "If you don't apologize today, don't even think about going to the quartet competition in half a month. Not just the quartet, but every competition you want to participate in from now on. I'll ruin it for you, so you won't be able to enter a single one." Sylvia felt as if she had been struck down. She couldn't believe Nigel would say such a thing, and her eyes slowly reddened. Meanwhile, Patrick coldly said to her, "Sylvia, you should apologize when you've done something wrong. Didn't your mother teach you that?" Sylvia clenched her fists, her whole body trembling. She knew she should apologize to get them to join the quartet. But Sylvia looked at the faces of the three of them. Nigel wore an expression of indifference. Patrick's eyes burned with anger, and the mockery in Vanessa's tear-filled gaze made the words die in her throat. Sylvia bit her lip until it bled, then shoved past them and bolted out. Sylvia stumbled home, only to find her already swollen ankle had worsened. She struggled to prop herself by the bed, reaching for medicated oil to tend to her ankle, when Sylvia's mom pushed the door open, with Vanessa's dad right behind her. "Sylvia, how could you bump into your sister's bumper car? Come with me and apologize right now. Do you hear me?" Sylvia remained silent. She didn't want to go, and she wouldn't. Sylvia's mom flushed with embarrassment and irritation as she roughly grabbed her hand. "Are you deaf? Can't you hear what I'm saying?" With a thud, Sylvia fell to the ground, the medicated oil in her hand instantly spilling all over her. Sylvia stared blankly at Sylvia's mom. The bedroom fell into complete silence. At this moment Vanessa's dad finally spoke up. All right, no need to be so fierce. Let us adults not interfere with children's matters, let them resolve it themselves." Vanessa's dad led away Sylvia's mom with a kind smile. As the door closed, Sylvia's eyes instantly reddened. She touched the bracelet on her wrist, then desperately suppressed her emotions. She bent down to pick up the half-empty bottle of medicated oil and continued to vigorously massage her swollen ankle. The pain in her ankle was sharp, but it paled in comparison to the ache in her chest. In the evening, having eaten nothing all day, Sylvia was starving and went downstairs to find food. The entire villa was dark and empty, not a soul in sight. Even the pots and stoves in the kitchen were cold, with not a single bite left for her. Sylvia stood there in a daze, unable to comprehend what was happening. She took out her phone intending to call Sylvia's mom, but then saw that Vanessa had just posted a new moment on social media, successfully checked in at the city's last remaining Michelin 3-star restaurant. Since they've racked their brains so hard, I'll reluctantly pretend to be happy Tilda. In the photo, Sylvia's mom Vanessa's dad stood beside Vanessa, looking like a picture-perfect family. Sylvia suddenly felt all her strength drain away. She bit her lower lip, tears streaming down silently, refusing to let out even a whimper. Because this wasn't her home. Even if she cried herself hoarse, no one would care. The next day, Sylvia arrived at the piano room on time and saw Nigel and the others practicing. She didn't know how to persuade them not to withdraw from the competition, but unexpectedly, Nigel and the others never mentioned withdrawing again, as if the amusement park incident had never happened. Sylvia was somewhat surprised, but since things were finally moving in the direction she wanted, she didn't say anything more and just kept practicing during the remaining time. 7 days later, the day of the quartet competition finally arrived, just before taking the stage. Sylvia was suddenly stopped by Nigel. "Aren't we going to cheer together?" Sylvia paused, looking at their 3 hands stacked together, waiting only for hers to join, when suddenly her nose tingled with emotion. Before every competition in the past, they would always cheer like this without fail, but after their falling out, it had never happened again. Sylvia placed her hand on top. Then, the few of them suddenly lifted it upwards, simultaneously and in unison shouting, "Go for it!" This scene looked exactly the same as before, But only Sylvia herself knew, they had long been different. She would try her best to finish this last quartet performance. Treating it as a proper farewell, Sylvia stepped onto the stage, but the moment she drew her bow across the strings for the judges, she suddenly felt something was wrong with the strings. But the competition had already begun. Sylvia could only continue playing. The piece they had rehearsed countless times flowed forth. Drawing satisfied nods from all three judges, Sylvia, seeing nothing amiss, gradually let her guard down. Yet just as she reached the crescendo, the string of her violin suddenly snapped. Nigel and Patrick shot sharp glances like arrows. Sylvia broke into a cold sweat but quickly steadied herself, continuing to play with the remaining 3 strings. As the piece ended, the score soon appeared, 95 points, just 1 point lower than the current first place. They were destined to miss the championship. After the competition, Sylvia walked out of the venue in silence, only to be immediately pulled aside by Patrick. "Sylvia, you're a violinist who can't even protect your own instrument. What right do you have to call yourself a musician?" Sylvia gasped, quickly explaining, "I checked the violin just this morning, it was perfectly fine. I don't know why the string suddenly snapped." "You don't know," Nigel sneered from the side. "You're just resentful about what happened before, so you're deliberately sabotaging us." "Sylvia, how can you be so malicious?" Sylvia's heart felt as if it had been pierced by a sharp blade, bleeding profusely. "Is this how you think of me?" She blinked, tears nearly falling. Nigel looked at her coldly. "What else? What do you think you are?" Sylvia suddenly held her breath, the pain rendering her speechless. Watching them walk away helplessly, a classmate approached and said, "Sylvia, I saw Vanessa messing with your violin case earlier. Could she have cut your strings?" Sylvia, startled, hastily thanked them and ran toward Nigel's direction. She wanted to tell them about this matter, but just as she reached them, she heard Patrick ask Nigel, "Sylvia didn't see you cut her strings, did she?" "No, she didn't," Nigel replied calmly. "Weren't you supporting her then?" "She was too overwhelmed to even notice. How could she have been in the mood to watch me?" Sylvia trembled and froze in place. "Who told her to be so vicious as to hurt Vanessa?" Nigel paused briefly before continuing. "Even if she knew the truth, what could she do?" "That's true." Patrick let out a low, muffled laugh. "She has no friends besides us. Who else could she team up with if she leaves us?" Sylvia lost the last trace of color from her face. Clenching her fists, she was about to charge forward recklessly to demand answers. Then she heard Patrick's next words. "Nigel, I haven't asked you yet, how does it feel to be liked by Sylvia?" Sylvia froze on the spot, her mind going completely blank. She never imagined her secret crush on Nigel would be exposed, and now, she heard Nigel snort lightly and say carelessly, "Annoying. With so many people in this world she could like, why did it have to be me? Why did it have to be him?" Sylvia murmured these words silently, feeling as if a gaping hole had been torn in her chest, so numb that even pain failed to register, leaving only emptiness behind. At this moment, Sylvia didn't even dare to wonder when they had found out. The mere thought of all these years, how Nigel had known everything yet still looked down on her as she tried to please him, made her desperate to flee. Anywhere would do, as long as it was far from them, far from any place with Nigel. Sylvia returned home in a daze. She immediately wanted to pack her things and leave, but just as she finished packing, she received an unfamiliar international call. After a moment's hesitation, she answered it. "Is this Sylvia?" An unfamiliar female voice came through. Sylvia asked blankly, "Yes. May I ask who's speaking?" The person immediately replied, "I've watched your audition video, and the standard is quite good. After discussion with the school, we've decided to make an exception and admit you." Span. Sylvia then remembered the audition videos she had sent to various music schools. Who would have thought that by sheer luck, she had actually won the favor of the school's faculty? Sylvia was instantly overjoyed and eagerly asked, "May I ask which college you teach at?" Whichever it was, she'd take it. The Royal Academy of Music. Completely oblivious to the bombshell she just dropped on Sylvia, the woman continued, "Also, I was once your father's student. My name is Rebecca. Feel free to come to me if you encounter any problems at school." Sylvia clutched her phone tightly, repeatedly expressing her gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Rebecca. I promise I won't let you down." After hanging up, Sylvia immediately received an acceptance letter from the Royal Academy of Music in her inbox. Staring at the prominent school seal on the document, she was rendered speechless. This was the Royal Academy of Music. Renowned as one of the world's finest music conservatories, it admits only 4 or 5 Chinese violinists each year, selecting the very best among the exceptional. Sylvia seemed dazed by the sudden joy, the boulder that had long weighed on her heart finally crashing to the ground. She suddenly dropped to her knees, clutching her phone as sobs racked her body. 3 days later came Sylvia's departure for England. At the same time, This day also marked Nigel and his two friends' departure for their trip, a journey they had planned before graduation, only now she was no longer part of it. In the bedroom, Sylvia had just taken out her newly issued passport when Nigel and the other two pushed the door open and walked in. She startled, instinctively shoving the passport into a drawer. Then, forcing composure, she asked, "Did you need something from me?" Vanessa glimpsed Sylvia's packed suitcase and, assuming she also wanted to travel, deliberately said, "Sylvia, you wouldn't want to come with us, would you?" Seeing Sylvia's silence, she emphasized, "Actually, we wanted you to come along too, but your mom said it would be a waste of money for you to go, and you'd be better off doing more chores at home." Hearing these words, Sylvia's already numb heart couldn't help but ache. There was a moment of silence in the room, then it was broken again by Nigel. "We've discussed it. Although you previously wronged Vanessa and deliberately messed up during the quartet competition, as long as you continue to accompany Vanessa, we'll let bygones be bygones." At this point, Sylvia could no longer feel sad. She simply looked at Nigel and asked softly, "How long do you want me to do this?" "For a lifetime." Seeing this, Nigel and the others just froze for a moment, exchanging glances. Then Patrick put away his playful smile and said word by word, "Of course. This is what you owe her, isn't it?" Sylvia suddenly clenched her fist. No, she owed nothing to any of them. Yet in the end, she said nothing, silently watching them leave with laughter. Sylvia turned around, staring blankly at everything in the room. The wind chime by the window was a matching set with Vanessa's. She had once said, "Vanessa, we'll each keep one. This will symbolize our friendship, unbreakable forever." The first formal dress in the wardrobe was a gift from Patrick. He had told her, "I'm lending you all my luck, may you take first place in every competition from now on." The rosin on the shelf for cleaning the violin was a gift from Nigel. He once said, "Fine rosin deserves a fine violin, and a fine violin deserves a fine player like you. Sylvia, join my quartet, and let's go to Golden Vienna together." Once, she treasured these words above all else, but now, she wanted none of it. By the time Sylvia came downstairs, they had already left, and the hall stood empty. Sylvia took out her phone, deleted their contact information one by one, cleared out her social media feed, and finally snapped her SIM card in half without hesitation, tossing it into the trash. This four-player friendship game she was done playing. Sylvia pushed open the door, and the gentle morning light fell upon her. Dragging her suitcase behind her, she walked step by step into the light, toward her brand new life, Shanghai Airport. Nigel, the three of them sat in the international flight waiting area. With 20 minutes left until the plane's departure, Nigel, bored out of his mind, he decided to play with his phone. After a while, I inexplicably clicked on Sylvia's moments. Her moments were always incredibly boring. Either videos of her practicing or various landscape photos without captions. Just like Sylvia herself, her mind contained nothing but piano practice. Nigel pressed his lips together, suppressing an inexplicable irritation, and was about to exit the page when Patrick leaned over. "What are you looking at? You look like you're suffering from some deep-seated grudge." He quickly turned off the screen and said dismissively, "Nothing." Patrick froze. He had already seen Nigel's phone screen, but he hadn't expected it to be Sylvia's moments. A strange, indescribable awkwardness flashed through him. It was as if someone was coveting something that belonged only to him. Patrick twitched his lips and leaned back in his chair. "You're not going soft on her, are you?" Vanessa said. "Sylvia is the daughter of a mistress. It's already embarrassing enough for families like ours to be involved with a mistress's daughter. Don't go looking for trouble." Nigel raised an eyebrow and said leisurely, "I know you hate mistresses, but to be honest, between the two of us, you're the one more likely to go soft on Sylvia." Patrick's face immediately darkened. Nigel was right. He did hate mistresses. His own mother had been driven to her death by one. Bullying Sylvia was no fun, but who asked her mother to intrude into someone else's family? They had shamelessly occupied half of the Parker family's property, and he didn't like it. But what he disliked even more was the way his heart softened every time he saw Sylvia. Patrick felt his chest tighten as he frowned at Nigel, a mocking smile curling at the corner of his lips. "I don't need your reminder. I know exactly what I'm doing." Nigel's face darkened instantly. He stared intently at Patrick, wordless yet imposing, just as tensions reached their peak. It was Vanessa's sudden exclamation that snapped them both back to reality. "Sylvia actually deleted me. Does she have a death wish?" Nigel Patrick looked at her simultaneously. Patrick let out a light laugh, his whole body relaxing again, not even noticing the certainty in his own expression. "It's fine. Use my WeChat to contact her. She definitely wouldn't dare delete me." Vanessa bit her lower lip, snatched Patrick's phone, and said angrily, "I'm going to ask Sylvia why she deleted me." But no sooner had she spoken than her body stiffened, and she looked at Patrick with a complicated expression. "She blocked you too?" As soon as she finished speaking, Patrick's face instantly darkened. Seeing this, Nigel only scoffed. Sylvia has actually grown a bit of a backbone. Vanessa lost her patience and turned her gaze back to Nigel. Nigel, lend me your phone. Sylvia would never block you. These words softened Nigel's expression slightly. Especially when he saw Patrick's darkened face, it brought him an indescribable pleasure. Here, just as he took out his phone, it was snatched away by Patrick. Nigel's expression darkened slightly, but he held his tongue with patience. The next moment, Patrick quickly opened WeChat and glanced at it. His relieved gesture was unmistakably obvious. Nigel's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Then he saw Patrick casually toss his phone toward him. Raising an eyebrow, he said, "Nigel, don't laugh at me either. You've been blocked by Sylvia too." Nigel's face darkened instantly. He picked up his phone and opened it. Sure enough, a glaring red exclamation mark appeared in his chat with Sylvia. Even though he could still access Sylvia's moments just moments ago, Nigel refreshed her moments feed again, only to find the entire page wiped clean, with a line of small text displayed below. "This account has been deactivated." Nigel felt her heart skip a beat. As if something had slipped beyond her control, Sylvia has deleted her WeChat account. As soon as he finished speaking, Patrick's pupils trembled violently, his expression completely darkened. He took out his phone and searched for Sylvia's number, only to find nothing came up. Patrick called, but the line remained out of service. He abruptly stood up and strode out with a grim face, not even bothering to respond to Vanessa's persistent calls from behind. "Patrick, the plane is about to take off. Aren't you coming on the trip with me?" Patrick didn't even turn his head as he gritted his teeth and replied, "Not going." He was determined to go and see Sylvia and find out what she was really up to. Vanessa's face flushed crimson with anger as she clenched her fists, turning to Nigel to vent. What kind of love potion has Patrick been given by Sylvia? But as she turned around, she saw Nigel tear up his plane ticket without hesitation, grab the backpack at his feet, and look back at her. "Vanessa, I'm afraid I can't go on the trip with you either. If you still want to go, I can find you a ground staff." Vanessa was so furious she swayed slightly, her eyes instantly reddening to a frightening degree. "Nigel, if you dare to leave, I'll never speak to you again." Her threat clearly didn't work. Nigel merely furrowed his brow slightly and said with displeasure, "Vanessa, you can't make jokes like that." With that, he no longer paid attention to her anger, and walked out of the airport while talking on the phone. Vanessa gritted her back teeth, her face a mix of pale and green, then stomped her foot fiercely and chased after him. "Forget it, if none of you are going, then I'm not going either," she spoke, her teeth clenching even harder. "I'd like to see what Sylvia is really up to, making such a big fuss." An hour later, the Parker family residence, Patrick stormed in, suppressing his rage, and yelled, "Sylvia, get out here now." He stormed furiously to Sylvia's room door and barged in without even knocking. The room turned out to be empty, though all her belongings remained undisturbed inside. Seeing this, Patrick first felt a wave of relief, which only fueled his growing anger. "So much for your tough act, just another tantrum after all." After muttering to himself, he walked straight in and swaggered over to sit on Sylvia's bed, looking very much like he intended to wait there until she returned. Nigel arrived at the scene to find Patrick sitting on Sylvia's bed, a picture of utter familiarity and ease. A flicker of discontent instantly stirred in his heart, prompting him to step forward and pull Patrick up. "Don't sit on her bed," he said, meeting Patrick's puzzled gaze. Nigel quickly added, "Didn't you say it yourself? You hate homewreckers." "I'm just worried you'll sit on her bed and then feel disgusted with yourself afterward." Patrick's anger choked in his throat, stuck halfway, neither rising nor falling. It swelled uncomfortably. The three fell into silence, each harboring their own ulterior motives, none willing to speak first, until Sylvia's mom's sudden exclamation shattered the awkwardness between them. "Why are you all standing here?" Patrick wanted to ask about Sylvia's whereabouts, but as he looked at Sylvia's mom, he clenched his hands and found it hard to speak. Finally, it was Nigel who asked in a deep voice, "Auntie, do you know where Sylvia has gone?" Sylvia's mom frowned suddenly and hesitated for a moment before saying, "I only just found out from the school's call that Sylvia quietly applied to schools abroad without telling anyone. She's probably in the UK by now." "What?" They were all startled at the same time. Patrick thought it over carefully before suddenly realizing, no wonder she was so eager to compete. It was all to earn credits for studying abroad. Nigel's expression darkened, but he remained silent with a grim face. Instead, Vanessa clenched her hands, forcing an extremely strained smile. "Auntie, Sylvia went to which university? Let me tell you, many students who can't get into prestigious domestic schools try to gild themselves by studying abroad, but it's completely useless, just a waste of money." The more she spoke, the more convinced she became that the truth was exactly as she described, her delicate face now twisted into something almost menacing. Quick. Call her back. Sylvia's mom felt every hair on her body stand on end under the scorching gazes of three people. After a long pause, she stammered out, Sylvia didn't ask me for a single penny for this trip abroad. She only said she'd contact me after settling down in the UK, and she's not attending some shady university, it's the Royal Academy of Music in Britain. This news exploded in their minds like a bomb, shattering all three of them completely. Vanessa's eyes burned with jealousy and disbelief. Getting into the Royal Academy of Music, Auntie, surely Sylvia is lying to you. Call her right now, tell her to come back. Vanessa's shrill voice made Patrick involuntarily furrow his brows. Enough. His mind was in turmoil, barely able to withstand Vanessa's meltdown. So what if Sylvia went abroad to study? At most, she'll come crawling back home within a month. She's only 18, with no money and no acquaintances in England. How long can she possibly last? Patrick turned ashen with anger, let out a cold snort, then turned and walked away. Nigel was slightly more composed than Patrick, yet still instructed Sylvia's mom, if Sylvia contacts you, be sure to notify me immediately. Sylvia's mom nodded with flattered surprise. Nigel finally turned to leave. Vanessa bit her lower lip, then chased after him, blocking Nigel's path with a visibly hurt expression. Nigel, why do you care so much about where Sylvia went? You're not falling for Sylvia, are you? Nigel suddenly halted his steps, then raised his head to meet Vanessa's gaze. How could I have fallen for her? I was just worried that after she left, there'd be no one left to play quartets with us. Vanessa stared intently into his eyes. Really? Nigel curled his lips, but his eyes gleamed with a complex light. Truly, it was over 10 hours later when the plane touched down in England. Sylvia stood on completely different soil. And what surged in her heart was excitement. She had finally taken a huge step towards her dream. As soon as she dragged her suitcase out of the airport, Sylvia saw a woman of remarkable temperament holding a sign with her name on it. Standing in the waiting area, she hesitated as she stepped forward and asked, "Excuse me, are you?" The woman folded the papers and extended her hand in a friendly gesture. "Sylvia, hello, I'm Rebecca, here to take you to the school dormitory." Sylvia was startled. She never imagined Rebecca would come to pick her up in person. Flustered, she quickly shook Rebecca's hand and said, "Miss Rebecca, I could have gone there on my own." Rebecca looked at the tiny Sylvia before her, hiding a touch of heartache, and smiled. "Didn't I tell you? Your father was once my teacher, so from now on, your affairs are my affairs." Sylvia suddenly found herself speechless, only gripping her suitcase tightly. "Thank you." An hour later, Sylvia arrived at the dormitory. The Royal Academy of Music had arranged all of this year's international students in one suite. Sylvia was just about to greet them when one of the students pointed at her face excitedly and said, "Sylvia, how come you're abroad? Shouldn't you be attending university back home with Nigel and the others?" Sylvia froze in shock. She searched her mind carefully for the person's face and name, but clearly, she couldn't recall them. But luckily, the person didn't mind, only saying, "Don't you remember me? I even reminded you back then that your strings were cut by Vanessa." Sylvia then connected Diana with the student from back then. Although Diana had misjudged the person, her heart was in the right place. Sylvia smiled and said, "I remember now. Your name is Diana." Diana, her eyes sparkled as she said with considerable pride, Yes, I'm Diana, the one who's always been overshadowed by you four, perpetually the runner-up Diana. If it weren't for your string snapping that time, we wouldn't have taken first place." Diana had an exceptionally cheerful personality, mentioning this matter without a trace of sarcasm, and even went on to introduce her roommate. "This is my quartet teammate, Cecilia, the viola player." Sylvia followed her gaze. The girl in sight had long black hair, with a natural beauty that needed no adornment, though she appeared to be a very introverted person, when introduced by Diana. Cecilia merely gave a slight nod without uttering a word. Sylvia hadn't even spoken when Diana pulled her close. "Don't mind her, Cecilia has always been like this. After all these years of working together, I've never seen her exchange more than a few words with anyone." Sylvia, our quartet's original violinist, got into a normal university back home and decided not to pursue music. Seeing you go abroad alone, I'm guessing you've also had a falling out with those three, right? Would you consider joining us instead? Diana winked and introduced her team with easy familiarity. "Yours truly happens to be the violinist in our quartet, and there's this unreliable guy who plays the cello, named Philip. He bought the wrong plane ticket and won't arrive until tomorrow, but I guarantee you, all three of us are first-rate talents." Sylvia finally found her voice and replied softly, "You don't mind that I beat you all those times before, why should you mind?" Diana found it strange instead, saying with righteous confidence, "You won first place by your own strength. though being perpetual runners-up doesn't sound great. We've genuinely learned a lot from your team. Now that you're single, I don't think any team would refuse to take you in." Sylvia immediately felt a pang of bitterness. So it was only Nigel and his team who couldn't see her talent. It turned out that in the eyes of others, she too could be someone worth fighting over. Diana, seeing her silence, simply leaned closer and whined, "We're really talented and nice people. You'd be losing out big time if you missed us." "Alright, I'll join you. We'll start training tomorrow." Sylvia didn't hesitate any longer and immediately accepted Songshi's invitation. Then carried her instrument back to her room. Diana froze for a second, still unable to believe her luck had arrived so suddenly. She let out an excited scream and turned to hug Cecilia. "This is amazing. We can play quartets together again." Cecilia also curled her lips, glanced at her, and then asked, "Do you really like Sylvia that much? I remember she's just a support in Nigel's team." Diana hummed twice, somewhat absent-mindedly. "If you've heard her solo, you'd understand why I like her so much. Sylvia is the most talented young pianist I've ever seen in our generation." 3 days later, the freshman semester began. Sylvia carried her instrument to the music classroom. Diana casually sat down beside her, flashing an ingratiating smile. Sylvia glanced at the people around her. One was Cecilia, and the other, a guy, was probably Philip, the cellist in their quartet. Philip had delicate features with a faint air of detachment between his brows. His tall frame and broad shoulders contrasted with his boneless posture as he lounged lazily against the chairback, as if even lifting a hand would be too much effort. Yet when he met Sylvia's probing gaze, the corners of his lips curled as he spoke softly. "Hello there, Sylvia. I'm your new teammate, Philip." Sylvia was momentarily dazzled by his strikingly handsome appearance, then quickly nodded and averted her gaze. Diana, since when did her teammate look this good? How had she never noticed before? They'd truly been fooled by Nigel and the others. Sylvia muttered a few complaints in her heart before dismissing the thought and lifting her eyes toward the podium. The first class of university passed by amidst various self-introductions. After class, Sylvia and the others went together to the Academic Affairs Office to sign up for the British Quartet competition happening in half a month. This was a highly prestigious competition. Sylvia would be facing competitors from all over the world, including Nigel and his group. She's already gone abroad. Who knows, Nigel and his crew might have already found new teammates, just waiting to face her and settle old scores. Sylvia, at the mere thought of this possibility, an overwhelming competitive spirit surged within her. She immediately dragged Diana and the other two to the practice room. "Let's go train right now and work on improving our teamwork in these few days." Diana, being pulled along, looked utterly alarmed. "Sylvia, it's our first day. How about we go for a team dinner to bond instead?" Sylvia didn't even turn her head, her eyes brimming with excitement. What could possibly foster teamwork better than practicing together? Team-building activities. "We can have those after winning first place in the UK quartet competition." Diana turned around painfully to look at Cecilia. "Save me." Before the words were finished, Sylvia eagerly pulled them away. Cecilia curled her lips almost imperceptibly, then heard Philip beside her sigh. "Would you say Diana is digging her own grave?" She tightened her grip on the heavy viola strap and calmly replied, "No, we need someone like Sylvia to spur us forward, don't we?" Cecilia gave a once-over to Philip, whose very walk exuded laziness, and shook her head helplessly. "If you and Diana were as eager for victory as Sylvia is, we wouldn't be stuck with the title of eternal runner-up." Philip nervously touched his nose and looked straight ahead. "Let's go." Meanwhile, in a practice room at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music in China, Nigel was introducing his new teammate, violinist Audrey, to Vanessa and Patrick. "This is Audrey from Shanghai Conservatory of Music, who ranked first in this year's entrance exams. She's been abroad before." Audrey wore an exquisitely tailored champagne-colored dress, her gaze carrying a trace of aloofness and arrogance as it swept across the room. She glanced at the group and stated matter-of-factly, "The reason I joined you is because you've maintained first place for several consecutive years. Only the top-ranked team is worthy of me." Vanessa found her dominance inexplicably overshadowed. She gave an awkward smile, then proactively and kindly said, "Shall we start practicing now? This is the score for our UK quartet competition. You can play the second violin part." "Second violin?" Audrey gave an absurd laugh, then coldly said, "Nigel didn't tell you. My joining you also comes with conditions. I want to be your first violinist." "Impossible." Vanessa's face suddenly darkened. "I'm the first violinist of this ensemble. How dare you try to take what's mine the moment you arrive?" Audrey looked at her with amusement and said bluntly, "What do you mean by stealing? The first violinist in a quartet should naturally be the most capable. Since you're inferior to me, why shouldn't I replace you?" Vanessa was speechless. She turned to Nigel, calling out to him as if for help, "Nigel." But Nigel nodded in agreement. Vanessa, don't be childish, she's not Sylvia. Between you two, it's truly a matter of the stronger one prevailing. For the championship, just bear with it." Vanessa looked at him in disbelief, her anger flaring up instantly. She turned her furious gaze to Patrick. "Patrick, listen to what Nigel is saying. He actually wants me to compromise." Patrick kept his head down playing with his phone, not even looking up. Hearing this, he merely said calmly, "Is Nigel wrong? If you want to be the first violinist, you can practice more in private and strive to surpass Audrey one day." Vanessa froze on the spot. She looked at the two familiar yet unfamiliar faces before her, and an unusual sense of panic welled up in her heart. Why Sylvia did everything change after she left? Audrey sneered with self-mockery. Within minutes, she already felt some regret for joining Nigel's team so hastily. She had thought the top-ranked team should logically have no major issues, yet she never expected the problems would be this severe. Audrey gave Vanessa a cold glance before taking out her own violin. "Let's begin. My goal for this competition is the championship." 2 weeks later, on the day of the British Quartet competition, Sylvia and Diana set off full of ambition, only to be surprised by the sheer number of contestants when they arrived at the competition venue. Contestants from various countries sat scattered, divided by their teams. Sylvia found a seat and was about to wipe her instrument when she heard a familiar voice. "Sylvia, it really is you." She looked up and saw it was a former high school classmate. What a coincidence. After greeting her, the classmate gave a surprised glance at Sylvia's companion and asked, "Is this your new teammate?" Seeing Sylvia nod, she felt a twinge of emotion in her heart. After all, she had been relentlessly defeated by Sylvia and Nigel's team while growing up. The once dazzling quartet that amazed everyone had now gone their separate ways, a sight no one wished to see. At that moment, with a whistle from the organizers, the competition began. Only then did her classmate remember the task at hand and said, "I should go now, see you later." With that, she turned and ran off, only to find when she reached her own team, good grief, sitting right next to them was Nigel's group. The classmate immediately felt awkward. Realizing that Nigel's team also had an extra stranger, she wanted to pretend not to notice, but the moment she sat down, she heard Nigel and his friends whispering about Sylvia. "You say Sylvia has been in the UK for half a month already. How is she still managing? Where did she get the money? Sylvia must be kicking herself by now. Without us, she probably can't perform in the quartet anymore. She's just being dramatic. Everything was fine, but she had to go abroad, probably just a stunt to grab attention. Didn't expect it to backfire, did she?" The classmate was practically sitting on pins and needles. She couldn't bear to listen any longer and turned her head to glare at the endlessly chattering Patrick. "Patrick, could you say less?" Patrick's words instantly caught in his throat, his face flushing with visible irritation. "What's it to you if I talk about Sylvia?" The classmate sneered and said bluntly, "It's none of my business, but I feel obliged to give you a heads up. The Sylvia you're talking about has already formed a new quartet." Patrick froze abruptly. He instinctively retorted, "Impossible. Who else could Sylvia possibly collaborate with besides us?" The classmate scoffed and stopped looking at him, saying only, "Whether I'm right or wrong, you'll find out soon enough." With that, he turned his head away and ignored Patrick. Patrick stood rigid, his face filled with disbelief. After a long pause, he slowly turned to Nigel and said, "Nigel, did you hear that? Sylvia actually joined someone else's team behind our backs." Nigel also looked grim, clenching his fists without speaking for a long time. Vanessa forced a smile and replied, "Impossible. Sylvia has no other friends besides us. It must have been a case of mistaken identity." Patrick's expression didn't improve with Vanessa's reassurance. If anything, it grew even darker. "Hey, listen, the match is about to start, and you're all completely falling apart just because of your former teammate's presence." After staying quiet for a long time, Audrey finally couldn't hold back and spoke up. She looked at each of them one by one, her presence overwhelming. "I really doubt whether you're actually the top-ranked team. What? Were your results carried by this person called Sylvia?" "Of course not," Vanessa denied vehemently without hesitation. "Sylvia is just our second violinist. It makes no difference whether she's here or not." Audrey finally withdrew her gaze and said calmly, "Then stop putting on this dead look. Let me reiterate, the only reason I joined you is to win the championship." Nigel glanced at the visibly displeased Patrick, his brow furrowed. "All right, stop overthinking. It's almost our turn. The match is what matters now." Patrick only managed to regain some composure upon hearing this, nodding stiffly. Sure enough, in due order, they were next to perform. Nigel led the three of them backstage. Before they went on, he specifically advised Vanessa, "Vanessa, this is your first time competing as a second violinist. You must remember not to show off. Just do what you're supposed to do." Vanessa, with a stern face, grunted a reluctant "Hmm." As soon as she stepped onto the stage, Vanessa's eyes met Sylvia's in the audience. Her entire body stiffened, the bow in her hand freezing instantly. Sylvia's gaze was calm, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Sylvia was saying, "How did you end up like this, without me? Can't you even hold on to the position of first violinist anymore?" Vanessa's hands clenched tightly, her rational mind teetering on the brink of collapse. The performance began. Vanessa broke out in a cold sweat on her forehead, her bow completely out of control. No, she couldn't be a loser in front of Sylvia. She couldn't let Sylvia laugh at her. Never. Vanessa gritted her teeth, and the violin's music instantly overpowered Audrey's, as if fighting for the lead position. The harmony of the piece was instantly shattered. Nigel and Patrick immediately looked at Vanessa in surprise, as did Audrey, who glared at Vanessa, but Vanessa wouldn't look at her, keeping her head down, clearly refusing to follow directions. Audrey had no choice but to slow down herself. Though her expression darkened completely, the song ended, and the scores came out quickly, 85 points. Audrey had never received such a low score before. Her face immediately darkened as she picked up her violin and walked away. Nigel and the others couldn't catch up with her no matter how hard they tried. At this moment, Nigel turned to look at Vanessa, feeling irritated and wanting to scold her, but seeing her pitiful expression, he didn't know how to begin. But then Patrick suddenly gave him a hard shove. "Nigel, look who's on stage." Nigel frowned, but followed Patrick's gaze to the stage, and instantly froze. On stage was the quartet that followed them, the other three faces completely unfamiliar, but the person standing in the very center, with a calm expression, who else could it be but Sylvia? Patrick had never seen Sylvia stand with anyone other than themselves. All he had ever thought about was teaching Sylvia a lesson. Sylvia had grown her wings and wanted to explore the world, fine, but she would inevitably come back obediently, because they were the most compatible teammates, and only he, Patrick, deserved to stand by her side. It had only been half a month. Sylvia was already standing by someone else's side. Was she not planning to come back? Patrick's face suddenly turned ashen, his heart feeling as if it were tightly clutched by something. Even the crushing defeat of his first 85% score didn't hurt as much as this. "Nigel, didn't you say Sylvia would come back eventually?" Patrick murmured, his expression gradually darkening. Nigel was also deeply shocked at this moment, and could only remain silent in the face of Patrick's questioning. Vanessa scrutinized Sylvia's companions carefully, searching her memory for a while before recalling their identities. "Don't worry, Sylvia's companions are all our defeated opponents. She must have been driven to desperation to seek them out." Facing Sylvia, Vanessa finally regained her former arrogance. "Just wait and see, what kind of performance can a bunch of losers possibly deliver?" Vanessa curled her lips smugly and actually sat down directly in the audience. Patrick clenched his fists, still wearing an expression of betrayed disbelief, and promptly sat down beside Vanessa. Nigel thought Vanessa was right. Sylvia was merely at the end of her rope. He even felt it unnecessary to linger for her sake, but with two in the group already seated, it wouldn't do for him to leave now, so, with deliberate ease, he became the third to sit down. All three looked toward the stage simultaneously, their gazes different yet strikingly unified. That was Sylvia. Sylvia actually has no thoughts in her mind right now. She did just witness Vanessa's strange behavior, but she didn't find it particularly odd. Vanessa wouldn't be Vanessa if she willingly settled for being a supporting act. Now she stands on stage, fingers unconsciously strumming the strings, her gaze drifting toward Diana and the others, instinctively seeking something, in the past. Whenever she looked at Nigel or Patrick, all she ever saw were their profiles as they gazed at Vanessa. But now, Diana cheerfully flashed her a victory sign. Cecilia tucked her long hair behind her ear and smiled at her. Philip looked up at her and silently mouthed the words, "Go for it." Sylvia suddenly felt her eyes moisten as she took a deep breath. She adjusted the chin rest into position, then nodded firmly. Instantly, all four began to play. In that moment, Sylvia felt as if she were back in the small room where she practiced piano as a child, the air thick with the scent of rosin, countless children her age holding violins, their faces stern as they played what sounded like noise. The teacher inspected them one by one, occasionally speaking aloud. "You must learn to temper your brilliance. The most important thing for a qualified quartet violinist is not how well you play, but whether you can truly integrate into your team." Sylvia closed her eyes, the teacher's words still echoing in her ears. "Sylvia, your pitch is off. Sylvia, your rhythm is unsteady. Sylvia, you lack emotional richness." She could feel the sweat beading in her palms, leaving damp marks on the neck of the violin. By now, she was able to play the piece perfectly, and finally, she had true teammates by her side. Sylvia opened her eyes and looked at Diana, Cecilia, and Philip. The faces of the three of them appeared clearly before her, and their music finally merged with hers. a flawless performance, perfect beyond reproach. Sylvia, as her bow stilled, the hall erupted in prolonged applause, her face flushed crimson as she turned excitedly toward her fellow musicians. We did it. Diana rushed over and pulled her into a tight embrace. Sylvia patted her back cheerfully, her gaze unconsciously drifting downward. Suddenly, Nigel and the other two below the stage locked eyes with her. Sylvia took only one glance before decisively looking away, and now, their score was finally revealed, 99 points. The competition came to an end without any suspense. The remaining teams, seeing this seemingly insurmountable score, had already foreseen their own fate. After the competition, Sylvia walked out holding the hefty trophy. Diana was still excitedly shouting, "Sylvia, you really are our lucky star. This is the first time we've won a championship of this scale. I have to take a picture and send it to my mom. Maybe if she's happy, she'll even send me a red packet." Sylvia smiled helplessly, forced to pose with Diana. Philip grabbed Diana by the back of her collar with one hand and complained, "You can take pictures later when we get back to the dorm. Can you stop acting crazy in the middle of the street? It's embarrassing." Diana finally gave up. Sylvia didn't feel much about it, she just wasn't used to everyone's gaze lingering on her after winning the championship. Once upon a time, Sylvia suddenly froze. Why was she thinking of Nigel and the others again? Sylvia's expression couldn't help but dim, and she clenched her hands. The excitement of winning the championship significantly diminished, but as they walked, Diana suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Sylvia didn't notice and almost bumped into her. She looked past Diana's body and saw a very familiar person standing in front of them. Patrick. Sylvia's heart sank. Philip glanced at Sylvia's expression, then shrugged slightly and said, "We've booked the party venue, sent you the address. Come join us once you're done talking." He didn't ask Sylvia what exactly had happened between her and her former teammate. Instead, he considerately stepped aside to let her handle the matter herself. Sylvia gave him a grateful look before turning her gaze back to Patrick. Patrick darkened his face instantly and strode toward her without hesitation. As he approached, he fired off an angry question. "Sylvia, aren't you going to give me an explanation?" Patrick pressed down on her with a heavy, accusatory gaze. Sylvia felt a sudden pang in her chest and replied calmly, "I don't know what explanation I owe you." Patrick was so infuriated by her words that he let out a bitter laugh. His handsome face clouded with gloom, he grabbed her hand and tightened his grip. "Why are you going abroad?" He paused, then softened his tone, speaking as if to entice her. "Didn't we agree to perform the quartet together, and then after graduation, work for the Shanghai String Orchestra?" Sylvia hadn't expected him to still remember that promise. Her eyes instantly welled up, but she forcefully pulled her hand away from his. "Sorry, but I don't want to be with you anymore. There's nothing wrong with studying here, at least it's better than being around you." "Bullshit." Patrick's face flushed with anger. He grabbed her hand again and, ignoring her protests, began to pull her outside. "You're going to withdraw from school right now. Once you're back in the country, you'll dutifully repeat your senior year of high school. Nigel and I will be waiting for you at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, and then we can play quartets together again." Sylvia felt as if her heart had been struck, her tongue awash with bitterness. Patrick dragged forward a few stumbling steps before planting her feet firmly. Patrick turned back in surprise, only to see an unprecedented seriousness on Sylvia's face. "Patrick, stop fooling around. You saw it all, didn't you? I already have a new quartet team." Sylvia's blunt and piercing words stabbed into Patrick's heart, draining the color from his face. "What do you mean?" He released his grip, studying Sylvia with probing eyes. "You're not still angry, are you? We've already stopped holding it against you, so what are you still hung up on?" Sylvia froze momentarily. She looked at him in disbelief and said coldly, "You're willing to let bygones be bygones, so you've always thought it was all my fault. I shouldn't have played the violin too well, stealing Vanessa's lead. I should have handed over my father's heirloom and given it to Vanessa. Even after being locked in the piano room all night, I should have been grateful that you finally let me out." Right. 3 consecutive questions left Patrick speechless. He held out for a long time before forcing the words through clenched teeth. "I'm sorry. I apologize for what I did before. Are you satisfied now? I don't care what agreement you made with those people, but right now you must tell them immediately that you're no longer working with them." Sylvia took a deep breath. The pent-up frustration in her heart didn't lessen. Instead, it grew even more upon hearing Patrick's apology. She merely said, "Patrick, do you think I'll unconditionally forgive you just because you apologized?" Patrick was stunned. His face finally paled at this moment, turning ashen bit by bit. "What do you mean?" Sylvia kept a cold expression as she forcefully pried his fingers open one by one, showing no mercy. "What I mean is, I can't partner with you anymore. Don't come looking for me again." With that, she turned away without another glance and walked off, Sylvia had only taken a few steps when she heard Patrick shouting hoarsely behind her, "Didn't you promise to stay by my side forever? You broke your word, Sylvia." His voice was raspy, laced with an indescribable sorrow. Sylvia didn't pause for him, vanishing from the spot without hesitation. But in truth, her eyes had already turned completely red the very moment she turned away. Yes. She had indeed said those words. Patrick was physically weak as a child. Whenever Sylvia wasn't by his side, the older kids would bully him. He didn't dare go home after being bullied because his mother had already passed away. With the mistress now in charge, not only would she ignore him, but she'd deliberately turn a blind eye and refuse to treat his injuries. Sylvia would take him back to her home and disinfect his wounds. That promise was made at that very moment. Sylvia truly kept her word to protect him for 10 years, yet in the blink of an eye, Patrick was the first to become a different person. He was the one who first betrayed the meaning of friendship. So what right did he have to demand she keep this promise forever? She didn't care why Patrick was here, but she, Patrick, and those two people, had long since gone their separate ways. Behind her, Patrick was still standing rooted to the spot, lost in thought, after an unknown amount of time. His phone suddenly rang. Patrick picked it up and saw it was Nigel. He answered heavily, "What's wrong?" There was a moment of silence on the other end before Nigel casually asked, "Where did you run off to?" Patrick gave a mocking laugh. "Stop playing dumb. You clearly know where I went." Nigel froze, and after a long pause asked in a low voice, "Yes, so what was Sylvia's attitude? You went to see her yourself. She must have agreed to you already." "Nigel." Patrick lowered his eyes, the thick sorrow directly hitting the Nigel across from him, rendering him instantly silent. "You guessed wrong. Sylvia said she's not coming back." Nigel couldn't quite pinpoint what he was feeling at that moment, only that countless ants seemed to be crawling all over him, gnawing at his sanity, making him feel utterly uncomfortable. Everything just felt wrong. In an instant, his breathing became heavy. "Patrick, you're lying." Yet the Patrick on the other end of the line remained eerily calm, so calm it was unsettling. "She said she won't forgive us for what we did to her." "Nigel, we've completely messed things up." Nigel's breath hitched abruptly. He couldn't help but tighten his grip on the phone, bloodshot veins instantly flooding his eyes. He closed his eyes briefly before reopening them, then replied hoarsely, "Sylvia is playing hard to get. Don't believe her. How could she possibly leave us?" Patrick let out a derisive laugh. Only now did he realize there was someone even more stubborn than himself. "Nigel, since that's how you feel, I have nothing more to say." Hung up, Patrick didn't hesitate to end the call, his expression dark as he hailed a taxi and headed straight to their prearranged hotel. Meanwhile, Nigel's face was visibly stormy. His mind was filled with Patrick's words. "Nigel, we completely messed things up." Meanwhile, at the hotel, Vanessa and Audrey were in a heated argument. Patrick had just arrived at the hotel. Nigel opened the door for him, and as he walked in, a pillow flew towards him. It was Vanessa, unable to win the argument with Audrey, who, in a fit of rage, picked up a pillow and threw it at Audrey. Audrey dodged quickly, so the hit landed on Patrick instead. "Vanessa, you'd better give me an explanation. I, Audrey, have never been treated like this in my entire life. Not only are you lousy at your job, but you're also a terrible person, utterly selfish to the core." Audrey struggled with her limited Mandarin, cycling through the same few insults over and over, but it was enough to shatter Vanessa's composure. Having been pampered all her life, when had she ever endured such humiliation? She immediately burst into tears and tantrums, dragging Nigel to demand an explanation. Patrick stood frozen in place, staring blankly at this absurd scene. "Suddenly, I realized how foolish I was. How could I have hurt the last person in this world willing to be kind to me without asking for anything in return, all for the sake of such a spoiled young lady?" Audrey couldn't be bothered to argue with Vanessa any longer and immediately grabbed her suitcase to leave. Nigel finally sensed something was wrong and stopped her, asking, "Our flight is tomorrow, why are you leaving now?" Audrey rolled her eyes so hard, she couldn't stand Nigel now either. "Nigel, I am officially informing you now, Audrey, I'm not serving you anymore. Your team is a garbage dump. Whoever becomes your teammate is simply unlucky for 8 lifetimes." Audrey pushed hard and stormed out in a fit of rage. Nigel had a splitting headache and immediately wanted to chase after her, but was stopped by Vanessa's desperate roar. "Nigel, if you dare to chase after her, I'll never forgive you. Let Audrey go if she wants to. When have we ever been short of a violinist?" Vanessa stood there with red eyes, biting her lower lip tightly, her hands clenched into fists. "If it really doesn't work out, we'll just get Sylvia back. Worst case, I won't scold her anymore." Patrick couldn't listen anymore. The temper he had suppressed all day finally erupted at this moment. "Vanessa, do you think Sylvia is some kind of ornament for you, to be summoned and dismissed at will?" Patrick kicked the coffee table violently, sending all the teacups crashing to the ground. Vanessa let out a frightened scream, then Patrick cursed angrily before turning and storming out, slamming the door with a deafening bang. The hotel room fell into complete silence. Sylvia arrived at the tavern just as Diana and the others were finishing their first round. The tipsy Diana was even more clingy than usual. Her flushed pink face leaned in as she whined pitifully. Sylvia, Patrick isn't here to reconcile with you, is he? You mustn't go back with him, we still need you here. Besides, Patrick and those two others are always bossing you around. If you return, you'll just become their slave again. Sylvia gave a self-deprecating laugh. So that's how others saw her, as a slave. It wasn't exactly wrong, she supposed. Sylvia snapped back to reality with some embarrassment and said calmly, I won't be going back. Diana let out an excited scream and immediately threw an arm around Sylvia's shoulders, shouting, Bartender, get our lovely first violinist a proper whiskey. My treat. Sylvia said helplessly, Diana, I don't drink. Diana grew even more excited upon hearing this and declared, but on a day like today, not drinking the good stuff just wouldn't be right. Philip. Diana looked solemnly at Philip and raised her glass. Will you drink or not? Philip snorted with laughter and clinked his glass against hers. I'll see this through to the end. Sylvia watched the scene, and suddenly, the knot that had been tightening in her heart for so long finally dissolved at that moment. Through the colorful lights of the pub, she stared blankly as Diana and Philip started a drinking contest, as if determined to drink one another under the table. Yet, her gaze met that of Cecilia, who was watching them with a gentle expression. Cecilia cast a serious glance at her, then suddenly tilted her head and smiled. Her smile struck Sylvia like a burst of fireworks, radiant beyond compare. Sylvia thought in a daze. Perhaps, she really had found a good group of companions. It was the dead of night, and there was hardly anyone on the streets. Sylvia and Cecilia each carried a drunken mess to a nearby hotel to get a room. Cecilia, though small in stature, was probably used to carrying her viola, so helping Diana took almost no effort. She looked back worriedly at Sylvia, who was almost crushed to death by Philip, and sighed, You sit in the chair for a while. I'll take Diana back to the hotel and then come help you. Sylvia struggled to poke her head out from between Philip's arms. Oh okay, watching Cecilia lead Diana away like a chick. Sylvia also painstakingly helped Philip to a wooden chair nearby and sat him down. How did you grow to be so tall? Sylvia let out a faint sigh. Just as she raised her head to gaze at the pitch-black sky, she heard the drunkenly puzzled voice of Philip beside her. Sylvia, what are you doing here? Sylvia froze for a moment before turning her head to look. Then Philip's eyes suddenly softened and blurred, the strong alcohol staining his pupils amber. His breath washed over her, and Sylvia's heart rate suddenly spiraled out of control, as if something invisible had gently squeezed it, then slowly released it, leaving behind a tingling sensation. Why can't I be here? I'm your teammate, Sylvia replied softly. Philip tilted his head even more puzzled and asked, Aren't you teammates with Patrick and them? He frowned in dissatisfaction, wrinkling his nose. You always beat me, making people laugh at me for being the eternal runner-up. Sylvia, you're really annoying. He uttered the word annoying very softly, sounding less like a complaint and more like flirtation. Sylvia's cheeks instantly burned as she turned her head away. So you don't like me as your teammate? I always feel like you're distant with me. Philip let out a muffled grunt and murmured, Of course I have to keep some distance. What if you found out I like you? What would I do then? Sylvia's ears burned instantly, her heart pounding like thunder. At that moment, her mind went completely blank, leaving only Philip's deep voice and the faintest trace of warmth. Sylvia parted her lips, about to say something, when Cecilia's voice came from afar. I'm here to help you. She immediately straightened up, inadvertently pushing Philip off where he'd been leaning against her. Cecilia walked up to them, casting a suspicious glance around at Sylvia. You haven't been drinking either. So why is your face so red? Sylvia could only fan her face awkwardly, laughing it off. It's so hot, so hot. Cecilia responded with a mix of amusement and exasperation. It's almost autumn. What hot are you even talking about? Sylvia, seeing she couldn't brush it off, quickly changed the subject. Let me help you. No need. Cecilia swiftly helped Philip up, as if his 6-foot-tall frame was nothing in her hands. She even had time to glance back at Sylvia. Aren't you leaving? Sylvia exaggeratedly opened her mouth wide. Gentle yet freakishly strong girl, the female lead from the manga has traveled to reality, the consequence of a night of heavy drinking. On the way back to the dorm, Diana kept ruefully tapping her head, complaining incessantly, This alcohol is too strong. My head feels like it's going to split open. As if remembering something, she suddenly looked at Sylvia again. So who passed out first last night, me or Philip? Sylvia pursed her lips, keenly aware of Philip's gaze landing on her face. then suddenly sprang up like a released spring. She quickened her pace and dashed toward the school dormitory. "I don't know," asked Cecilia. Diana and Cecilia exchanged a puzzled glance. "What's wrong? Did someone step on her tail?" "I don't know. But I certainly didn't." Only Philip's expression shifted, and he watched Sylvia disappear from sight with a solemn look. Sylvia walked absent-mindedly toward school when she suddenly noticed someone standing by the dormitory building. "Patrick!" Sylvia snapped to attention instantly, her back straightening rigidly. Patrick looked terrible. He probably hadn't slept all night. Still wearing yesterday's crumpled clothes, his chin was even sporting a bit of stubble, and his eyes were bloodshot. Patrick, when had he ever been in such a sorry state? Wherever he appeared, he always carried himself with an elite demeanor, not like this, not like an abandoned dog. His gaze at her so sorrowful yet stubborn. Sylvia felt a sudden pang in her heart. Though there were at least 20 meters between them, she could still feel his sorrow so intensely it seemed capable of wounding her. Sylvia painfully averted her gaze, pretending not to see him as she walked past. Patrick remained silent, watching her with sorrowful eyes. Sylvia felt something was off, but couldn't quite put her finger on it. It wasn't until the next day when she left the dorm and saw Patrick again that it suddenly hit her. Patrick had resumed his old habit of persistent pestering. Sylvia pressed her lips together and pretended he didn't exist. Sure enough, Patrick followed her again. Perhaps knowing he wouldn't gain anything favorable from her, he didn't initiate conversation, merely trailing behind at a distance neither too close nor too far. Sylvia was eating in the cafeteria when Patrick sat at the table behind her, watching her eat. Sylvia was playing the violin in the music room when Patrick stood at the back of the classroom, watching her play. Sylvia was returning to her dorm to rest when Patrick sat on the wooden bench below the dormitory, staring blankly at her window. After a while, even Diana couldn't take it anymore. "Sylvia, though I'm on your side, you can't just let Patrick keep standing like this. It's pitiful." Sylvia could only feel helpless in the face of such words. She couldn't tell Diana about what had happened between them. So she had no choice but to start with Patrick. "I'm going downstairs right now to finish him off." Sylvia ground her teeth in resentment and immediately headed downstairs. Sylvia had just rushed up to Patrick when she saw his eyes suddenly light up. "You're willing to come back to the country with me?" Sylvia let out a cold snort. "No, I came to persuade you to leave." "I won't." "Sylvia," Nigel's voice suddenly came from behind. Sylvia suddenly, her mind went blank. She didn't even dare to look back, yet her heart was already overflowing with bitterness. Patrick could only watch as Sylvia's eyes transformed from fury to lifelessness in an instant. It felt as if a heavy, massive stone had been pressed against his chest, leaving him gasping for air. Sylvia turned around in silence, locking eyes with Nigel. Nigel rarely managed to squeeze out a smile for her, one that could even be described as warm. He first glanced at Patrick, as if to say, "If you can't do it, watch me." Then he turned to Sylvia, reaching out his hand with gentle certainty. "Sylvia, come home with me. Didn't we agree we'd go play our violins in Golden Vienna together? You can't go back on your word now." Sylvia's eyes instantly reddened, breathing grew increasingly rapid. As if teetering on the edge of emotion, Nigel curled the corner of his lips slightly, just as he thought victory was assured, only to see Sylvia shake her head resolutely. "I don't want to partner with you anymore, Nigel. No, I should say you, Patrick, Vanessa, all three of you. I never want to see any of you again in this lifetime." The words were utterly heartless, leaving Nigel with a ringing in his ears that lingered. He looked absurdly at Sylvia, then incredulously at Patrick. Their faces overlapped, as if torn from the same shadow, shattered and then glued back together. Nigel had heard Patrick say before that Sylvia wouldn't come back, but deep down, he always believed he was different from Patrick. Just like the words spoken between ordinary friends, can they be the same as those spoken to a secret crush? Therefore, Nigel naturally assumed that Sylvia was waiting for him to lower his head, but when he actually came to her, Sylvia uttered these words. Nigel looked at Sylvia with unbearable pain, his heart churning with indescribable emotions. It felt as if she had slapped him hard in front of Patrick. "Sylvia, I'm not Patrick. I won't give you another chance. If this is the attitude you're showing me, then I think there's really no need for us to continue working together." Nigel thought he had Sylvia by the throat. After all, he had seen just how much she used to adore him. But now, Sylvia's eyes clearly held not a trace of affection. The way she looked at him was no different from how she would look at any stranger on the street. "Nigel, I think I've made myself quite clear." Sylvia left no room for hesitation. After uttering these words, she turned and walked back upstairs to the dormitory. Only the visibly upset Nigel and Patrick remained, facing each other. After a long silence, Patrick let out a self-deprecating chuckle and looked at this elite who had always held himself above others. "Nigel, do you see it now? If you had known earlier that Sylvia was serious, You wouldn't have spoken to her with such arrogance. Nigel, however, merely twitched the corner of his mouth. It's just playing hard to get. Patrick, hearing these stubborn words again, truly couldn't be bothered to respond to him anymore. A deep sense of powerlessness and irritation surged in his chest, and he even found himself eerily empathizing with Sylvia. Sylvia falling for you is her own damn fault. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Nigel standing silently in place. Sylvia rushed to her dorm and eagerly pressed against the window, pulling open a small gap to peer down below. But the figures of those two people were no longer visible. Sylvia remained silent for a while before curling her lips in self-mockery. She drew all the curtains shut, leaving not a single gap. Half a month later, the quadrennial Tchaikovsky International Music Competition commenced. This is the competition all classical musicians dream of. As long as one shines brightly here, they will gain more international performance opportunities in the future. Sylvia also participated in this competition 2 years ago, but she couldn't even make it to the finals of the violin group. The judges at the time commented on her, full of spirit, yet she hid herself, unable to truly shine. Sylvia had already habitually hidden her talents by then, unable to truly unleash herself even in solo competitions. But now it's different. Diana never lets her hide her shortcomings. She always said, everyone has their own strengths. You may be amazing, but I'm not bad either. One day I'll catch up to you. So when this year's competition began, Diana dragged her to sign up, excitedly declaring, this time I'll definitely blow your mind. The Tchaikovsky International Music Competition consists of 6 categories, each awarding first, second, and third prizes. Diana not only convinced Sylvia to register, but also pulled Philip into signing up together, after an initial online screening. It was no surprise that they all advanced to the semifinals. The subsequent rounds of the competition were all held in Moscow. To fully focus on the competition, Sylvia and her teammates even took 3 days off from school and flew to Moscow in advance, eating, drinking, and having fun. After all, in Diana's words, since we're already in Moscow, it would be like we never even came if we didn't experience the local customs. The moment the plane touched down, Moscow's mild weather slightly dispelled Sylvia's lingering unease. Philip walked beside her, effortlessly taking her suitcase. Have you been to Moscow before? Sylvia nodded, unusually shy as she admitted. I came once for a competition before, but didn't even make it to the finals. Philip didn't seem the least bit surprised, merely saying, I have a feeling this time will be different. His gaze was direct and burning. Ever since that drunken night, he'd been like this. Sylvia felt her palms grow slightly damp, unconsciously rubbing them together. She couldn't quite name the feeling in her heart, only that she couldn't help wanting to escape his gaze. Then I'll take that as your blessing. With that, he fled as if in panic toward Diana. Hey, what are you guys talking about? Philip couldn't help but laugh. He quickened his pace toward Sylvia, then steadied his steps to follow behind her without closing the distance further. Several people arrived at Moscow's famous Bar Street, where the crowd was sparse. They had barely walked a few steps when they bumped into the trio of Nigel coming from the opposite side of the street. Sylvia was startled at first, but considering how renowned the event was, it was no surprise at all that the 3 of them would show up, just as Sylvia pretended not to see them and tried to walk around. Vanessa haughtily blocked her path. Well, if it isn't Sylvia, what brings you here? I distinctly remember you didn't even make it to the finals last time. What brings you back to compete now? The flight from England to Moscow isn't cheap, and I imagine you're not exactly rolling in money these days. Why waste this plane ticket? Vanessa's words were so cutting they pierced straight to the heart. Sylvia clenched her fists, but habitually gave in to Vanessa again. Let's go. She grabbed Diana's hand, ready to leave, but she didn't expect Diana to explode like a powder keg. He immediately blocked Sylvia, like a large bird protecting its young, and fired at Vanessa. What are you, anyway? A defeated opponent shouldn't bark here. It's embarrassing, don't you know? Sylvia's pupils suddenly constricted. She stared blankly at Diana, her heart suddenly swelling with sour ache. It was a strangely wonderful experience. Before this, whenever she encountered Vanessa, everyone would say the same thing. This is what you owe Vanessa. You should let her have her way. Vanessa is your sister. Why must you always argue with her? Isn't it only natural for you to play second fiddle to Vanessa? What right do you have to compete with her? Such remarks came endlessly, and at first Sylvia still wanted to argue back. Why should I always give way to her? I clearly haven't done anything wrong. Isn't a quartet about whoever's strongest taking the lead? Why do I always have to be the accompaniment? What exactly do I owe her? My mom marrying her dad wasn't my fault. But after a long time, Sylvia stopped saying things like that, because it was useless. Everyone assumed she had to give in to Vanessa, for no reason. This was what she owed Vanessa. But today, Sylvia was about to yield again when Diana stepped in front of her. Diana was like a valiant female knight, charging into battle for her. Sylvia's eyes suddenly grew moist. Oh my God. Did you hear that? How can someone be so shameless? No wonder I disliked Vanessa the moment I saw her. I was talking to a whole new species. Diana's mouth was still firing like a machine gun, spitting out words rapid fire. Vanessa had never encountered someone like this before. Just dealing with Audrey had already given her a taste of how cruel the world could be. When Diana berated her, she even forgot how to retort, her face flushing red as she pointed at Diana and stammered. You, unable to utter another word. In the past, at least she had Patrick to back her up. But ever since Patrick returned from seeing Sylvia, he's been like a changed man. He was taciturn, and now he just silently stared at Sylvia, as if completely oblivious to Vanessa being humiliated by Diana. Vanessa immediately broke down, wiped away her tears, and ran out. Vanessa, Nigel instinctively shouted, glaring displeasedly at Sylvia. Is this how you tolerate your teammate insulting Vanessa? I'm truly so disappointed in you. Sylvia felt her heart clench violently. In that instant, it was as if she had returned to the past, facing Nigel's accusations again, utterly powerless to utter even a single word in response. But in the next second, a broad figure stepped in front of her. Philip, who almost never wore a cold expression, now had a face so icy it could freeze 3 feet of ground, his usual lazy demeanor nowhere to be seen. Nigel, does bullying a girl make you feel accomplished? Philip's biting sarcasm was no less sharp than Diana's. His words instantly darkened Nigel's expression. I'm talking to Sylvia. What right do you have to interfere? Nigel took a step forward, his face full of coldness. You're just her temporary partners whom she's only known for a few months. Do you really think you can meddle in Sylvia's affairs? Believe it or not, Sylvia will still end up with us. After all, we're the ones who have truly been friends with her for 10 years. As soon as these words were spoken, Diana and Philip's expressions changed instantly. An indescribable heaviness permeated the air. Nigel was right, they were the best of friends. Could a decade of friendship really be severed just like that? Nigel had just curled his lips when he saw Sylvia take a deep breath and step forward, shielding Philip with her own body. He froze, a sinking feeling rising in his chest. Then, Sylvia spoke slowly and deliberately. Nigel, you stopped being my friend long ago. Now, they are my best friends. Sylvia really felt it was meaningless. She didn't know how many times she had said similar things, to Patrick and to Nigel, but they seemed to completely misunderstand Chinese, eagerly approaching her, repeatedly bringing up their decade-long friendship, emotionally blackmailing her. But if they truly valued that friendship, how could they bear to hurt her so deeply? It's just unwillingness, that's all. Someone who was once under my control has slipped through my fingers, so I'm unwilling, so I'm helplessly furious, and I want to drag her back again. Patrick. Sylvia glanced at Nigel's silent companion. Patrick, among these three, the one she knew best was Patrick, and likewise. Patrick knew her best too. He should have known that every word she said was serious. She truly never wanted to see them again. Are you really going to keep making a scene? Vanessa has already run off. Aren't you going after her? Sylvia spoke with eerie calm, yet that calmness was like a sharp knife, plunging deep into Patrick's heart once more. He had tried his best to hide himself, just to catch one more glimpse of Sylvia. But it was all ruined by Nigel and Vanessa. Patrick cast an extremely indifferent glance at Nigel. If you're not leaving yet, I'll go ahead. I only came along to accompany you all anyway. There's no Viola category in this competition. His words finally brought Nigel back to his senses. Nigel turned pale with anger. Knowing full well that letting other matters affect his mood before the match would be detrimental, he fell silent, merely glaring coldly at Sylvia as he said, I truly never imagined you'd become this kind of person. Diana immediately raised her voice and was about to hit him again. If you can't speak properly, then shut up. Who said you're in charge? Nigel, however, disdained to listen further, glancing at Patrick. Let's go. He then left as if nothing had happened, and Patrick did the same, though his eyes remained fixed on Sylvia. But thankfully, when he leaned in, he only whispered, it doesn't matter if we can't be teammates, but Sylvia, please don't push me away, okay? Patrick kept his attitude consistently humble, as if the person who had once laughed wildly and bumped into her with bumper cars wasn't him at all. Sylvia turned her face away without speaking, but her indifferent profile still made Patrick's heart ache. Patrick followed Nigel away in silence, his face nearly pale. Sylvia's heart also began to ache, little by little, but Diana put her arm around her shoulder the next second. Don't be sad, Sylvia, don't you still have us? Nigel and his friends clearly aren't good people, so it's normal to dump them. This is called getting rid of the dross. Sylvia's foul mood was instantly swept away by Diana's timely interruption. She just laughed and said, that's not how you use discard the dross. Diana, you must not have paid attention in high school Chinese class. Diana was instantly speechless. Sylvia, on the other hand, laughed even more easily. Aside from the corners of her eyes, which had unknowingly reddened, no one looking at her would have thought she was actually a little sad inside. She had long been accustomed to hiding her true self. Just as she averted her gaze, Sylvia met Philip's eyes. He didn't join Diana and Cecilia in their laughter. Instead, he watched her with a deep frown, his eyes filled with concern. Sylvia froze, her heart inexplicably touched by something profound, which then quickly vanished. During the semifinal draw, Sylvia drew Group A on stage. As she stepped down, she saw Vanessa provocatively flash her drawn slip. It clearly read, Group A. Vanessa raised an eyebrow sharply and silently mouthed a phrase at her. See you on the field. Sylvia saw it but pretended not to, calmly walking towards Diana and her group. As soon as she sat down, Diana leaned in gossiping. What did Vanessa just say to you? Sylvia repeated it truthfully. She said see you on the field. Diana immediately laughed without restraint upon hearing this. Vanessa actually dares to challenge you. She probably doesn't know your current skill level. I can't wait for the match to start. I'm already looking forward to seeing her humiliated. Sylvia didn't actually feel strongly about defeating Vanessa, but seeing Diana's eager anticipation, she nodded seriously. I get it, I'll crush her in this. Diana paused, then excitedly grasped Sylvia's hand. I'm falling for you more and more, Sylvia. Philip's eyebrow twitched as he intolerably brushed off Diana's hand. Could you stop harassing Sylvia already? As he spoke, his gaze met Sylvia's, only for her to immediately avert her eyes, leaving him deflated inside before he vented his frustration by grabbing Diana by the throat. Just the day before yesterday I heard you say you loved Cecilia the most. How come you've changed your mind today? Cecilia's eyes darkened slightly as her hand gently reached for Diana's neck, simultaneously blocking Philip's hand while lightly touching Diana. Oh really? So who do you love the most then? Diana shivered involuntarily as the cool touch of Cecilia's hand met her neck. Survival instincts suddenly kicked in, and without hesitation she broke free from Philip's already loose grip, pressing herself warmly against Cecilia. Of course it's you, Tilda. Sylvia couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry, helplessly averting her gaze. The next day, the semifinals officially began. Sylvia carried her violin on her back, parting ways with Philip at the entrance. The violin and cello groups were in different locations. After agreeing with Philip to meet at the cafe across the street when it was over, Sylvia headed to the violin competition venue with Diana and Cecilia. From a distance, you could see Rao Lu and Vanessa arguing at the competition venue again, and even without hearing their voices, just by looking at their expressions, it was clear Vanessa was getting chewed out once more. Diana couldn't help but click her tongue a few times. Sylvia, why does Vanessa always rush to get scolded? Does she have some special kink or something? Sylvia pretended to ponder deeply before coming to a conclusion. Maybe she does. The two exchanged a smile, while Cecilia watched silently from the side, her fingertips twitching slightly. After the competition began, everyone quieted down. Occasionally, after a highly skilled individual finished playing, sparse applause would ripple through the venue. Under the gaze of the world's most accomplished violinists, most contestants falter due to sheer nervousness. Sylvia glanced at Vanessa just before stepping onto the stage. Her face had already turned pale. Sitting motionless in the audience like a statue, Sylvia stood on the stage, unusually alone without anyone by her side. She closed her eyes, took a few deep breaths, and calmed all her emotions. The next second, the rich tones of a violin filled the venue, and Tchaikovsky's meditation instantly captivated everyone present. By the time it ended, the audience erupted into the most enthusiastic applause of the day. Sylvia calmly stepped down, brushing past Vanessa, only to notice Vanessa's hands trembling. For once, she hesitated for a moment before standing in the spot closest to the stage, gazing at Vanessa. Moments later, Vanessa placed the violin against her neck, and the very first note was off-key. Sylvia didn't listen any further, turning to leave without hesitation. At that moment, she finally knew Vanessa would never again have a chance to catch up to her in this lifetime. At 5 in the afternoon, Sylvia received a text message informing her that she had advanced to the finals. At the same time, Diana and Philip also made it to the finals together, an unprecedented first in history, a quartet team with a 100% advancement rate. No matter how far they ultimately go, this achievement alone is enough to outshine all the freshmen this year, especially considering all 4 of them are just 19 years old. The future looks incredibly bright. The only trouble was, Sylvia had to ask her counselor for leave again. Tomorrow is the final. Sylvia rarely experienced insomnia that night, virtually the first time in these 18 years to lose sleep over a competition. She sat alone on the wooden bench outside the hotel, Several empty beer cans scattered at her feet. Sylvia, it was her first time drinking, even with just an 8% alcohol content. After a few cans, the intoxication had unknowingly crept up her cheeks. Suddenly, someone sat down beside her. Sylvia turned her head to see Philip, dressed in the simplest white shirt, yet looking extraordinarily handsome against the night. She stared intently at Philip's lips, which were opening and closing as if he were saying something. He was probably asking her why she was drinking downstairs alone and hadn't called him. Sylvia, however, had no desire to respond, her mind filled with one thought: what would it feel like to kiss such soft lips? So with alcohol clouding her mind, Sylvia made the most impulsive decision of her life. She leaned in gently, touched lightly, then pulled away, then she licked her lips, tilting her head in confusion as she asked, "Why don't I feel anything at all?" Philip's eyes darkened abruptly. He lowered his head and pressed his hand against Sylvia's nape, stroking it repeatedly. "Because you did it wrong," Sylvia asked like a good student. "Then how should it be done correctly? Teach me." Before she could finish speaking, Philip leaned in. The streetlight's glow was completely blocked by his broad figure. Sylvia saw only darkness before her, first sensing his scent, then the touch of his lips. It was like a fine net had completely enveloped her. The damp, lingering touches were like an endlessly rising tide, ebbing and flowing with Sylvia's every breath, constantly lapping at the shore, then seeping in little by little until she was completely saturated. Sylvia now felt as though she had also been tainted with Philip's scent. It wasn't until a soft splash sounded that, dizzy from his kisses, she finally pushed against Philip's chest, only to be forcefully pulled back by Philip. The nighttime kiss deepened further, devouring what little reason she had left. The next day, Sylvia woke up with last night's memories flooding back to her like a tide. In an instant, her face flushed completely red, stunned. She touched her lips, sending a tingling sensation through her as if the touch from last night still lingered there. Sylvia took a long time to mentally prepare herself before finally leaving her room. Just one step out of the room, and there was Philip leaning against the wall opposite, head bowed as he played with his phone. His broad shoulders made him look like a walking clothes hanger, whether in a suit or casual wear. Sylvia's face, which had just cooled down, flushed red again in that instant. Philip seemed to hear the sound too. The moment he looked up and saw her, a natural warmth surged in his otherwise indifferent eyes. He put away his phone and slowly walked toward her. Sylvia stammered, "Why were you waiting outside my room so early in the morning?" Philip took her hand, interlacing their fingers naturally, and said, "Because I was afraid you'd wake up and pretend not to remember." He bent down slightly, gently coaxing her. "You've already kissed me, Sylvia. Give me a proper title, won't you?" Sylvia, what else could she say? She could only forcibly suppress the wildly beating heart in her chest, pretending to be calm as she said, "Okay." Though even a single word revealed the tremor in her voice, it instantly pierced through Philip's mind. Philip also froze in place for a moment before clearing his throat and saying, "I'll take you to the competition." Sylvia nodded silently, then felt his hand tighten around hers. So when Diana, after sleeping like the dead, energetically carried her violin and headed to the competition venue with Cecilia, what she saw was Sylvia and Philip holding hands, practically glued together. Diana's mind went completely blank, her mouth dropped open exaggeratedly, feeling as if she'd been struck by lightning. Then she violently shook Cecilia. "Cecilia, am I still dreaming? How did they get together behind my back in just one night?" Cecilia, on the other hand, smiled faintly. Her smile was full of satisfaction and comfort, and she even had the presence of mind to comment, "Isn't this a perfect match? And this way, Sylvia will be completely tied to us, and you won't have to worry about Sylvia being snatched away by someone else." Diana closed her mouth and thought carefully. As if it really made sense, she instantly accepted this fact, stepped forward and punched Philip hard on the shoulder, and said aggressively, "Although I met you first, if you treat Sylvia badly, I will still stand by Sylvia's side." Philip was so hammered by this punch that his soul almost floated away. He was about to retort with a grimace, but met Cecilia's murderous gaze, and immediately wilted, sighing, "Forget it, adults don't bother with petty people." With that said, he continued leading Sylvia away. Sylvia turned her head and saw Cecilia softly comforting Diana, which also made her pause in surprise. Then, as if sensing something, Cecilia looked up and met her gaze with a gentle smile, exuding the demeanor of a refined lady. Sylvia understandingly withdrew her gaze, a peculiar smile also curling at the corners of her lips. The four finally arrived at the competition venue. Philip didn't let go of Sylvia's hand, and Sylvia, of course, let him. But when they parted ways, they always ran into people they shouldn't have. For example, Nigel, and for example, Patrick. As for Vanessa, she probably lost the competition and didn't even show up today. "Sylvia, you're actually with someone else," Nigel, with his cello on his back, lost his composure in front of Sylvia for the first time. His face turned ashen, his eyes brimming with disbelief. Sylvia first glanced at Patrick beside him. Seeing that Patrick had only turned deathly pale but remained silent, she finally shifted her gaze back to Nigel's face. "Yes, that's right. Is there a problem with that?" Nigel staggered violently, his lower lip bitten hard enough to leave marks. "But didn't you like me?" When this nearly forbidden topic was finally broached between Nigel and Sylvia, Sylvia felt as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had waited for this moment long enough. Sylvia gently raised her hand intertwined with Philip's before Nigel's eyes and said calmly, "I did like you, but that's all in the past now. No one will keep liking someone who bullies them. Not even you, Nigel." As soon as the words fell, Nigel's face turned deathly pale. Philip completely darkened at the mention of bullying. Even Diana and Cecilia behind them frowned and grew serious. They had always thought Sylvia's separation from Nigel and his group was, at most, a minor spat, never imagining they would hear the word bullying from Sylvia's lips. Dislike and bullying are fundamentally two different situations. Nigel stood before Sylvia, feeling as though she had stripped him bare and thrown him into a crowd to face judgment. Their gazes, filled with disgust and resentment, cut into him like knives, yet he was speechless, unable to utter a single word in his defense. Nigel almost fled in disarray, but before leaving, he shot a resentful glance at Philip. "I will defeat you in the upcoming matches. Once you become my vanquished opponent, Sylvia will naturally realize who she truly should love." Philip returned his gaze with disdain. "I thought so too." The group parted on bad terms, the air between them thick with tension. The 19-year-old boy's fighting spirit burned so fiercely it nearly scorched him. Sylvia was too worried to leave, so she stayed behind voluntarily to watch Philip's match. "My competition isn't until later anyway, so keeping you company wouldn't be a problem." Philip still wore a cold expression, but at least he affectionately pinched her cheek before saying, "Fine then, just wait and watch your boyfriend defeat Nigel." Sylvia froze for a moment. She had never seen such intense competitive spirit in Philip before. For such a laid-back guy to have such a fiercely combative moment was truly something new. Sylvia didn't refuse him, instead giving him a gentle hug. "All right, I'll wait for your triumphant return." Half an hour later, Nigel took the stage first, supporting the heavy and expensive cello. His gaze remained firmly locked on Sylvia in the audience. Then the lyrical sound of the cello rose, showcasing his exceptional skill, concluding the performance with near-flawless perfection. Sylvia, despite her reluctance, she gave a half-hearted clap. When Philip took the stage, Sylvia's heart genuinely trembled. Philip sat at the center of the stage, his long legs slightly apart, his million-dollar instrument casually resting between his knees. The lights fell, and the moment the cello sounded, the audience fell into complete silence. Sylvia stared blankly as Philip played the cello, his arm extended smoothly with the bowing motion, its lines fluid and powerful, each movement carrying an effortless grace. In this moment, Philip was not just a performer, he was more like a poet dancing with the music. "The person you like is truly remarkable." Patrick's voice sounded just as Sylvia remained completely lost in Philip's piano playing. She turned her head to look at Patrick, only to make a startling realization. Patrick had truly changed so much. His once restless temperament had completely settled, and the condescension he used to carry was nowhere to be seen, replaced instead by a more introverted demeanor. "It seems he has truly changed." Sylvia even felt a touch of lamentation, and replied from the heart, "You could have been as formidable as him, but ever since that incident, you changed." Patrick froze. He curled the corners of his mouth bitterly, as if he had finally decided to let go. A desperate expression on his face. "Actually, I didn't isolate you because of Vanessa." Sylvia paused, utterly bewildered. "Then why was it?" Patrick met her gaze, enunciating each word clearly. "It was because of jealousy. Jealousy that the person you liked was Nigel, and not me." Sylvia's mind went blank. She stared at Patrick in disbelief, murmuring, "You, like me." Patrick finally spoke the words he had kept hidden in his heart for so many years, his eyes completely red. "Yes, I like you. I've liked you for a long time." From the first day Sylvia protected him, Patrick fell in love with this strong and generous older sister. It started as friendship, and he didn't know when it turned into love. Patrick wanted to see Sylvia every day, to be the only man by her side. After much deliberation, he finally mustered the courage to confess his feelings, only to find, in Sylvia's room, the love letter she had written to Nigel. Patrick was utterly devastated. He took Sylvia's love letter and went straight to Nigel, originally intending to say, "You know what, the person I like actually has feelings for you." But the words that came out were, "Sylvia actually dares to set her sights on someone like you. How ridiculous." Just as Patrick had predicted, With those words, Nigel, who had initially been somewhat moved by Sylvia's confession, instantly aligned himself with him. I never expected Sylvia to like me, I only saw her as a friend. Watching Nigel put on airs while saying this, Patrick felt so nauseated he could die, yet he dared not speak, his chest crushed by jealousy, followed by an overwhelming sense of resentment. Sylvia, why wouldn't she like him? If that's how it was, then he wouldn't treat her the same way anymore. Who cared about her kindness? And even more coincidentally, Vanessa came running over to them, crying, Sylvia is shameless, she seduced my dad, her whole family are homewreckers, they're all sluts. Patrick instinctively wanted to curse back, but then suddenly stopped. He glanced at Nigel, and inexplicably uttered the first insincere sentence, and then, this insincere sentence was like a snowball, rolling bigger and bigger, until an avalanche, completely burying him underneath. Nigel, you know I hate homewreckers the most. If you ever talk to Sylvia again, you'll be going against us. You have to choose between us and Sylvia. Patrick couldn't bring himself to tell Sylvia everything that was on his mind, because the moment Philip stepped off the stage, Sylvia averted her gaze from him. She hadn't even finished listening to his confession. She hastily blurted out, that's all in the past now, and then ran towards Philip without hesitation. Patrick watched, utterly crestfallen, for a long time before he finally thought to himself. His eyes read, yes, that was already in the past. He originally had a chance to compete fairly with Nigel, but he ruined it with his own hands, and now they can't even be friends anymore. Patrick stood up in a daze and walked towards the door. He could still hear Sylvia's voice coming from behind him. Philip, you're really amazing. These words were like the last straw that broke Patrick's back. He had never been so clearly aware. He had lost Sylvia forever. Forever. Sylvia really gave Philip a proper compliment. Then, Philip raised his eyebrows smugly, wrapped his arms around her tightly, and deliberately shouted loudly, of course, look who you're talking to. Unlike some people who are just average but act like everyone else is beneath them. What a shameless act. Diana chimed in right on cue. At that moment, Nigel, who was passing by them, looked utterly lifeless, carrying his cello in silence. He fled in complete disarray. Diana was practically glowing with triumph. Only to notice Sylvia had fallen quiet. Thinking she still had feelings for Nigel, he said somewhat awkwardly, what's wrong with you? Sylvia clenched her fists tightly and said firmly, I must win first place. She seemed deeply motivated by Philip's victory, silently making a vow. That championship would definitely be hers today. Sylvia, as soon as these words were spoken, the previously tense atmosphere instantly dissipated. Diana patted her shoulder and cheered, yes. This championship is definitely yours. Go for it. Charge bravely toward your champion's throne. Cecilia swiftly covered her mouth and apologized. Sorry, she's been binge-watching anime all night and got a bit too fired up. Sylvia nodded understandingly, then turned to Philip, suddenly cupping his face and planting a fierce kiss on him. Wait for my triumphant return. Then, with a murderous expression, she slung her musical instrument over her shoulder and strode toward the backstage of the competition. Philip watched Sylvia's figure with utter contentment, his heart brimming with sweetness. Did you see that? She kissed me on her own just now. Diana and Cecilia exchanged a glance simultaneously, their eyes brimming with disdain. Sylvia stood on the stage, her fingers unconsciously stroking the bow of her violin. She knew every weathered scratch on this violin that had accompanied her for 10 years as intimately as the back of her hand, just like the calluses on her fingers. Each one bore witness to every sleepless night she'd endured over the past decade, every sweat-drenched afternoon practice session, every grueling 5 a.m. morning she'd forced herself to rise. Before she could think further, the judges below whispered, begin. Sylvia took a deep breath and placed the bow on the strings. The glaring spotlight shone on her, and the audience below was a blur of darkness. She could hear her own heartbeat thump, thump, thump as if it might burst through her chest, but she quickly calmed down, because she knew that below, there would always be 3 pairs of watchful eyes fixed on her. The moment the melodious sound of the violin began, memories of the past 10 years came flooding back like a tide. At the age of 6, Sylvia saw her father play the violin for the first time. She couldn't imagine that an instrument could produce such heavenly sounds. From that day on, Sylvia begged her father to teach her the violin, never imagining how difficult this path would be. She remembered the first time she pressed the strings. The excruciating pain in her fingertips kept her awake all night. As her father applied medicine to her fingers, he said, "You can still quit now if you want." Sylvia stubbornly shook her head. "No, I will stand on the world's greatest stage one day, just like you, and bring glory to our country." From then on, she practiced at least 7 hours a day, until her fingers were raw again and again, until her shoulders were so sore she couldn't lift them. But she never spoke of giving up. The Sylvia of then didn't give up, and the Sylvia of now won't give up either. As the last note faded, silence fell over the hall. Sylvia still had her eyes closed, hearing only her own heavy breathing and the pounding of her heart. After a long while, she slowly opened her eyes. What met her gaze were the judges' approving nods and the audience's stunned expressions. She knew then that she had truly done it on the grandest stage, bringing glory to her country. Amid thunderous applause, Sylvia could only see through blurred vision. "Dad, did you see? I didn't let you down." The first prize for the violin section goes to Sylvia. Sylvia, clutching the heavy trophy, excitedly dashed off the stage and threw herself into the arms of her 3 companions. This is only the beginning, she thought resolutely in her heart. 10 years of honing a sword ensures its blade will shine upon unsheathing. The musical journey of Sylvia has just begun. The end.